Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update, a live stream, first live stream I've hosted myself since I have been back, since I've got back from holiday. I hope everything is all right with all of you out there. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, for sticking with me while I was on holiday, reporting to you on a daily basis. I hope that although it was probably not as consistent and as fulsome as I would like it to have been, I was on holiday, so hopefully it was all right for you guys. That's the main thing. I hope everything like audio and visuals are okay for you at the moment. My internet's showing that it's a bit dodgy, which it shouldn't be. So that's what happens when both my boys are at home, taking up all the bandwidth. So let me know if it does get a bit dodgy, and I'll go and just turn their PlayStations off and tell them to go outside with a cardboard box. Okay, I had a live stream last night with Greg. So thank you for those who dropped into that or who were already there. I know, Hadrian, you were asking me to go and join that, and actually it was your message that made me go and look and then say, oh, by the way, I'm here, so thanks for that. Glad you were on the live stream last night with Greg. Great show. So yeah, it was a really good show. It was a long one, no doubt. I had to go to bed, but I presume he was up for a very long time waiting for the results to come through from the Alaska summit in terms of, you know, the closing remarks or the press conference, the short one thereafter. What we're going to do today, if you don't mind, is we're going to start with general geopolitics news to work up towards talking more about Alaska. I've got quite a lot more on that to say, but although I've said an awful lot, and what I have said already isn't my analysis isn't going to change. It's just adding extra bits of analysis from other people and, you know, different angles here and there. But I think it probably was as disastrous as I initially said it was. I mean, it wasn't the worst, as in there wasn't an agreement that signed Ukraine away, sold them down the river, that was agreed at that time. I don't think that could have happened. You can't sign an agreement on behalf of Ukraine. So although some people were thinking that was the worst outcome and it wasn't as bad as that, therefore it was good, I mean, that's a bit of a problem. It was terrible. The question is, you know, what was realistically the best that one could have hoped for was certainly a lot better than that. It's a complete capitulation to Putin. What's the worst that realistically could have actually happened? That's got to be fairly close to it, because there's not a lot else Trump could have said or done to have. I guess you can imagine other scenarios, but as I said, you can't sign anything on behalf of Ukraine. It was just really embarrassing. I think it was an embarrassing moment in Trump's political history. And funnily enough, I've often said this, the worst moment of Trump's political history in Trump 1.0 and kind of up till now was Helsinki 2018, where Trump did the same thing, where he spoke to Putin, except that time he was alone, but only with a translator. Spoke to Putin, came out and just regurgitated Putin's nonsense. Actually, that's broadly what happened yesterday, except he had wingmen by his side, and it still was the same. Although, by all accounts, the people by his side were ashen-faced. We're going to come to this later. Some commentators who were there live, like, the people are not looking happy around Trump. Trump comes out, looks very tired, and seems to regurgitate Putin's talking points. And I guess the people around him. I mean, the problem with Trump is that he's so kind of narcissistic and self-absorbed and unaware of really the grander scheme of things, that he could come out of that not realizing how much he had been owned. But the people around him would have been very aware of how much he had been owned. And it's very likely, it's very plausible that Trump thought it genuinely was a 10 out of 10 meeting, as he said. But for like for Marco Rubio, he's like, oh my God, that's a 2 out of 10 meeting. What an absolute shocker. So they're walking out ashen faced and pale eyed and whatnot, and looking all stressed. Trump's tired, but generally thinks it was all right, thinks it was even great. And in reality, the difference between reality and perception is dangerously large there. But yeah. So anyway, we'll get to that. We'll start with geopolitics. I've bumbled on too long already. So I do apologize that I am disrupting your day, Karen. I just got home from running errands and planning to do chores, but the draw of a JP Live has got the better of me. Hey, you can do chores and listen to me live. Just get the duster out and whatever your chores might be. I'm here with you, and I will. I will be the impetus for you I will make you angry enough to want to scrub harder or move the vacuum more quickly. Anyway, let's go to where we're going to start, which is in fact what I'm going to have to do is move my face over there. I mean, ideally for you guys, I'd move it off the screen. Right. The EU plans sanctions on China over covert drone engine shipments to Russia disguised as refrigeration units, according to Politico. There has been some criticism coming from Scott Dissent that there are no kind of secondary sanctions on China, India, etc., from Europe. There have been these criticisms that, hey, we're the ones doing stuff. Well, actually, Europe are on their 19th sanctions package. So don't start criticizing Europe about sanctions, Scott Dissent, as a Treasury Secretary. But Europe are doing very well at keeping the pressure on Russia. What they really want is help from you guys to do the same in terms of sanctions. And of course, the US threatened sanctions 2 weeks, 50 days, 10 to 12 days. Oh, no, didn't happen. Sanctions have been this threat that haven't come to fruition. And so criticism from the US to Europe, I think, is somewhat pot calling the kettle black. 15 EU countries confronted Beijing, but got denials or silence. An EU diplomat warned the war could look different without China's support. Absolutely. I said at the beginning of the war very clearly that Ukraine have not won. Sorry, let's put it the other way around. I said at the beginning of the war, Russia has lost this war because they didn't plan for a war. It's a special military operation. They had these objectives. They failed. And they failed with Plan B as well, taking Kyiv. And so they're left with Plan D, E, F, G, H, I, wherever they are at now. But they've certainly lost in what they originally planned to do. The only way that I said this 3.5 years ago, the only way that Russia can prevail is if China come on board to help Russia, give the full force of their support. Now, they haven't done that, but they are supporting Russia in really meaningful ways that has, I think, resulted in Russia prolonging this war. This war is a protracted war, partly because the West hasn't really gone to town on supporting Ukraine. The US, January the 21st, Trump could have come in and absolutely dealt the death knell to the death blow to Russia, but didn't. China have helped protract this war in a way that no other country could in terms of helping. I say no other country, but actually North Korea have also done so in a really significant manner. In fact, more explicitly with overt lethal aid. Now, Kyivstar, the what's the name? Ukrainian. Thank you. Couldn't find a word. The Ukrainian very big mobile phone company has sought up to $200 million in placing themselves on a NASDAQ. Their NASDAQ debut makes them the first Ukrainian listing on the NASDAQ, which is really impressive. Reuters reports Kyivstar, which serves 24 million customers in Ukraine, will reportedly become the first Ukraine-based company listed on the NASDAQ. So that's good news there. Now, Conservative Karol Nawrocki, who is the new president for Poland, has only just been sworn in. I mean, this actually happened a good 10 days ago, but I haven't done a proper geopolitical update since 2 weeks I've been away. So hopefully you're all right in the live chat this side. Conservative historian Karol Nawrocki was inaugurated as Poland's president on the 6th. So that's happened. In fact, he was one of the people on one of the phone calls with Trump last night, because I think rather than Tusk, he is a bit of, he was invited to the White House by Trump. So he's a real MAGA supporter, this guy. So if you're going to get someone, he's also not a fan of Russia, by the way. So as a historian, he's very much been he's a populist, right-wing populist, but right-wing populist who doesn't like Soviet history and how they've oppressed Poland. So he's an interesting person to be president of Poland, because on the one hand, he kind of doesn't want to support Ukraine in those big overt ways, in a kind of MAGA way. So he's very much in the MAGA mold. But on the other hand, he's not pro-Russia. And that makes him interesting. But he's very much a darling of the White House. So he's a useful person to have on the phone call. Okay, we're going to go to Serbia. So Serbia has seen a whole bunch of protests going on consistently over the last, week, I guess. This is August 13th. That was 3 nights ago. Clashes in Serbia between Vucic's supporters and opponents. Vucic is going to be largely supported by Titushki and ultra-nationalists, far-right sorts, whereas the people protesting against that are very much student-led. As often happens in many movements in such places, universities and student, that kind of liberalism is often the tinder that starts the fire of protests. Here, unfortunately, though, we see them kneeling on hands, hands tied, facing the wall behind the internal security services. These are students and peaceful citizens whose only crime was asking for freedom, justice, transparency, and an end to corruption. So Serbia, just to remind people, is an EU candidate country. It's not in the EU, but it wants to be. Silence from Brussels is not neutrality, it is complicity. Europe cannot look away while democracy is humiliated on its doorstep. Now, that's an interesting criticism of Europe here. They are being very quiet, it seems, on Serbia. Why is that? Are they trying to play a very careful game? I don't know. Just across the way in Hungary, we had and there's a huge crowd here, and I think really Glastonbury did these guys a favor. So this is an Irish band called Kneecap. Kneecap got into an awful lot of trouble. They were censored. Basically, they were going to be shown on British TV and on the Glastonbury Music Festival, kind of the live on BBC. BBC cut them and showed some other guy instead. But that other guy that they showed instead was just as vehemently pro-Palestine and anti-Israel, and that got the BBC into loads of trouble. Now, they were caught between a rock and a hard place, the BBC, because they didn't want to show that because they didn't want to be too kind of anti-Israel. So then they, win the plaudits of people who are pro-Israel, but actually more and more people are becoming pro-Palestine, or at least anti-Israel, in the way that Israel have been dealing with the Palestinians and Hamas. And so the BBC were absolutely excoriated for shutting down Kneecap, showing this other guy. Then he was really pro-Israel, and shutting him down. And you're going to annoy someone there. But what happened is Kneecap then were thrown into the limelight in a way that they would never have dreamed of being. Like Kneecap, I'm positive, wouldn't have been as big as they are now had they not been at the center of this BBC scandal over Glastonbury. Now they've gone to Hungary, and these people who are otherwise, fairly obsessed with like Palestine are now getting the Hungarian crowds to chant F Orban, F Orban. So while festival crowds across Hungary chant Moxos Fidesz, filthy Fidesz, young Poles at Katowice's OFF festival shout F Orban during a Kneecap concert. So actually, this footage is from Poland, not from Hungary. So there's a big movement around Eastern Europe. You're looking at Serbia, you're looking at Hungary, you look at Poland, with some of the young starting to get mobilized here. So this is a Kneecap concert, the Irish rap group, who recently got banned from entering Hungary. That was it. So they were banned from entering Hungary because they were pro-Palestine. Hungary, if you remember, Viktor Orban is very Christian nationalist. It's not his history, by the way. I think he's historically an atheist, actually, but now he's really embracing Christian nationalism, Orban, in a way that you see Putin do in Russia. So very much a useful vehicle. So traditional values, anti-LGBT, anti-immigrants, anti-liberal universities. So shut down the Central European University, Viktor Orban in Hungary, stopping Kneecap coming in, being pro-Israel and anti-Muslim, and therefore anti-Palestine, so on and so forth. That has led to this, and to young people not being too happy across Eastern Europe with Viktor Orban and with that approach. Anyway, some interesting dynamics when you look at all this. Now, Hungary's opposition leader has accused Russia of election meddling. So there's going to be an election in 2026, and you can bet your bottom dollar, in fact, bet your bottom $50, maybe even your mortgage, that Russia is going to be massively engaged in election interference in Hungary. Hungary's opposition leader, according to Bloomberg, Peter Magyar, has accused Russia of deploying its intelligence services to undermine his campaign against Viktor Orban. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service published a statement that repeated lines often used by Viktor Orban to discredit Magyar. So that is going to be ongoing. Now, you've got interference in Georgia as well. Georgian Dream are ruling there with the help of Russia for the 200 and election meddling for the 255th day. Actually, that was on the 9th, so you can add another 7 days to that. So it's 262 days, I presume, now in a row. The main avenue in Georgia's capital has been blocked by protesters. The illegitimate pro-Russian corrupt regime needs to collapse. 60 plus political prisoners are now detained in Georgia, in Tbilisi, including many opposition leaders. They need to be freed. So the struggle is ongoing there, and hats off to the Georgians who continue to do that at probably very much their own expense. Very costly for them in terms of lost days, jobs, and maybe losing jobs for doing this, and so on and so forth. But also the violence, the oppression, etc., etc. In fact, we're going to return to Georgia because the one of the imprisoned former Georgian leaders has made a statement on the Alaska summit. Now, even stronger protests in Georgia this evening. So this is going back to the 6 or 10 days ago, after one of the biggest names in free journalism, Mzia Amaglobeli, was jailed for 2 years for slapping a policeman. 50-year-old Mzia, a director of the Batu Malebi and NetGazeti sites, was arrested back in January in pro-EU demonstrations. Now, we're going to move from Georgia to Moldova. And the Moldovan regional head of Gagauzia, Evgenia Gutul. So if you remember her, she's quite striking, very thin, young leader, female leader, and she, I don't know why I said thin, but she, like, that's how I always recognize her from photos. She's quite a striking looking person. She has been jailed for 7 years. Now, this is very interesting because, again, the dynamics here are fascinating to look at. You are going to have pro-Russian entities shouting about how this is shutting down opposition leaders in Moldova. This is one of the breakaway states. It's not Transnistria, but it's similar to Transnistria. Transnistria is actually annexed. Here's another region where there's a lot of Russian influence, where you could imagine they're kind of self-annex, if you like. Now, she's been a leader and fomenting a discord for some time. She's been jailed for 7 years over illegal funding of a pro-Kremlin party. Now, remember, Ilan Shaw as well has been kind of shipped off to Russia. He's persona non grata, although popular with the pro-Russian sorts in the region. Now, Chisinau court, that's not how you pronounce it, court ruled that she was guilty of systematically bringing funds from Russia to Moldova, which is almost certainly true, for the now banned pro-Russian Ilan Shaw's party between 2019 and 2022. So, I mean, that could be good news for stymieing, but genuinely so. I mean, with justification rather than just shutting down opposition. But actually, this is shutting down opposition who deserve to be shut down because they're broken the law. And that could give Moldova a fighting chance, because although they've had presidential elections and the EU referendum recently that they just about got away with, they do, I think, have elections upcoming, rather like Hungary and other places. So, you know, something to watch for. Now, talking about pro-Russian fugitive oligarch Ilan Shaw, he has announced his intention to seize the Grand National Assembly Square in the capital of Moldova. He will pay $3,000 to those who come to the protests he has organized, according to the Financial Times. Now, that was 4 days ago. I don't know when this is for and whether it's happened or not, but Shaw himself is in Moscow, says Max 25. He created a cryptocurrency for shadow payments in Russia to circumvent sanctions. So he is very much behind Russia's ability to circumvent sanctions. In just 4 months after its launch, about $9.3 billion was processed on a special exchange. So that is Ilan Shaw, and you know, all of these countries are just going through very similar processes with differing outcomes. Like Georgia has just not managed to break away from Russian influence. Moldova seems to be on the cusp and has just about managed it. Romania has just about managed to break free. Serbia seems to be in the middle of this contest at the moment. Hungary is on the precipice of getting out of the grasp of Russian influence, but it depends on whether Orban is able to rig elections in 2026. So it's all happening in this neck of the woods. So Moldova may receive support for EU accession earlier than Ukraine, according to Politico. European countries may vote to open the first negotiation cluster for Moldova in early September after a meeting of EU ministers. That could be because Ukraine has had some challenges with regard to independence of the sort of corruption organizations, investigative organizations. Such progress by Moldova with Ukraine's application synchronous with it may cause discontent in Kiev, especially considering that the country is not in a state of open conflict. The article states that such a step could at least be a symbolic blow to Ukraine, that is. We've already gone through Kiev Star doing that. So here we have Italian officials were warned of possible Russian sabotage at Aviano air base, which hosts US forces and stores nuclear weapons. A female suspect was stopped after allegedly photographing the site. Arson attacks were also reported nearby. An investigation is underway and the Prime Minister has been briefed. Aviano air base is under the Italian ownership and control, but hosts the US Air Force's 31st Fighter Wing. The base is one of 6 in Europe involved in NATO nuclear sharing, storing B-61 bombs in secure underground facilities. Arson in Italy isn't unheard of, from my knowledge, says Geo Insider, and there have been a few cases around Aviano as well, but it's still uncommon overall. And this incident may not be directly related to the base or its current issue. According to Rai News, a security alert was issued days ago about a potential threat to the base. The woman arrested near the base is part of the No Base movement, which opposes military installations. In response, authorities have increased security measures, deploying special units to the site. Firefighters confirmed they have not responded to any recent fires. The investigation is ongoing. So that update I hadn't read. I'd read all the previous ones. But anyway, so it might not have anything to do with Russian influence. But this is a constant theme that we are seeing throughout Europe. We have had Poland, the mall there that was burnt down. We've got bases that are constantly being monitored. Germany, indeed Italy as well. We've got Norway, where the dam was hacked in Norway and they released water, the Russians. We've had hospitals in France that have been hacked by the Russians. We have issues in the UK, other issues in France, particularly running up to the Olympics, so on and so forth. Like, Russia are clearly at war with Europe. Like I keep saying over and over again, we may not admit that we are at war with Russia, but Russia is at war with us, whether we like it or not. And it just there's a constant theme of what's going on there. Right. Do you know what? I'm going to leave this. This is extraordinary. I'm going to leave this because I want you to actually listen to what Scott Bessent says, the US Treasury Secretary, until the end, because I want to play that. I can't do it through this browser, so I have to just change and do that. Right, Germany, and I don't know if this is 100% true. Some were saying when I last reported on this that this might be the right-wing component of Germany trying to get this to happen. But German government is preparing a draft law to reduce social benefits for newly arrived Ukrainians. According to Reuters, payments may be cut by 100 euros a month for each refugee. Something we've been hearing, sort of similar movements around a number of countries, including the United States, in terms of what to do with refugees 3.5 years after the war. Do they still qualify? You know, I've had that debate before. I don't want to relitigate that. Now, apparently, Thailand has stopped opening bank accounts for Russians en masse, according to Moscow Times, a good 8 days ago. I haven't heard much since then, but Thailand stopping opening bank accounts for Russians en masse is interesting. Now, little aside here, let's give you some holiday updates. When I went on holiday just now, I met quite a few interesting people. One of the people I met, and I think I mentioned this in a video the other day, was a British guy who works in IT for British Airways, and him and his wife both, I think, working directly for British Airways. They get free flights, 6 free flights a year or something. Anyway, they go to loads of places. The end, all you need to know is these people travel quite a lot, right? And he was telling me, like, I didn't mention anything to do with YouTubing and Russia and blah blah blah, but he involuntarily offered that Russians abroad are an absolute nightmare. And he said he was just been in the UAE recently, and he says it's an absolute nightmare there. and in Turkey and in Thailand. So Thailand's an interesting one. I know we've got Aussie Bugger from Cambodia often on the, I don't know if he's here in a live chat now, but he says similarly, like Cambodia near Thailand. So in fact, they've been a loggerheads, haven't they? So the Russians are very good at trying to take money out of Russia and put them into these other places like Turkey, like Thailand, like the UAE, launder their money through there. And these places, as a result of receiving so much Russian money, actually are quite susceptible to Russian influence. So if you remember back in some time ago, there's a Russian band that was playing in Thailand that were detained by the Thai police because they were slagging off the war and Putin's war. And even though they had dual citizenship, I think they had like Israeli passports as well. And in the end, I think Israel got them off, but Thailand were going to deport them back to Russia, and they'd only do that if they were somehow beholden to Russia. UAE is one of these countries where there is an awful lot of exports of goods from other countries through the UAE to Russia, right? So they are helping Russia big time in many ways. And Turkey as well straddles the fence of the foot on both sides of the fence. I mean, they haven't sanctioned Russia in the same way Europe has. They allow money to come from Russia into Turkey, and they're happy to wash that money, so on and so forth, and help Russia out as much as they conceivably can, while actually also rhetorically and politically being on the side of Ukraine more than they are on Russia. So they're a very interesting country. But anyway, point of talking to this guy, he was really critical of Russians abroad. And I went to Turkey 4 years ago for a holiday. Last 4 years, we just, because my MS means I can't move. I spent 2 weeks in a wheelchair just now, by the way, on holiday, because I took an illness with me to my holiday. We went to the Dominican Republic, and I spent, luckily they gave us a wheelchair, and my missus was pushing me around basically the whole time. I could walk and shuffle around, and when I was in the pool, it's great. I was playing like pool volleyball and stuff, so buoyancy helped me, but I was really struggling to get around, yeah, so I was just, anyway, when I was in the last 4 years, because of my MS, my multiple sclerosis, I can't go on active holidays anymore. I used to be I'd love to go backpacking, culturally go and see loads of cities, go to museum after museum. You know what I'm like, a bit of a tigger and whatever, going around all these places. Now I'm kind of resigned to, and do you know what's all right? Sitting by a pool for 2 weeks. So we spank our holidays all on 2 weeks in the summer, somewhere nice where I sit by the pool and the boys have some water slides to go on and stuff like that. So essentially, that's how I holiday now. Now that's a real shame, but that's life. It's not shame. I mean, very privileged to be able to do that. So anyway, when I went to Turkey 4 years ago, when we first started doing this, Russians had a really bad rep on holiday there. And I've always been wondering, do we I mean, the British haven't got a great rep for being holiday makers, have we, anyway? But the Russians are universally not liked by everyone else who's a holiday maker. They got the worst rep on a real bad rap in Turkey. And it's the same, I think, everywhere I hear about Russian holiday makers, they are slagged off by everyone else. And I've seen loads of videos of them being horrific, including in Thailand. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting that speaking to this guy and then I talked about what I did, is like, oh my God, we need to sit down and we need to talk. He was saying this to me. We need to just have some beers and talk about this. We never did get to do that, although I played quite a bit of pool volleyball with him. But anyway, that was just my little holiday aside concerning Russian holiday makers. Okay, right, getting back to what I was actually talking about. Let's move me to the right again. You don't need to see me close up. No one's idea of a good time. Right, so then we have and this happened actually, when was this? August the 8th. So again, 8 days ago, Narendra Modi, the leader of India, just really obsequiously praising my friend President Putin. We had a detailed conversation because, of course, they're caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of secondary sanctions from the US. But the question is, what is the US going to do about secondary sanctions now? Are they going to continue to hammer against India for them buying Russian hydrocarbons? Or has Putin managed to get Trump to take his foot off? Are we going to see Indian tariffs reduced? Are we going to see China, the pressure on China from the US reduced? I thanked him for sharing the latest developments on Ukraine, said Modi. We also reviewed the progress in our bilateral agenda and reaffirmed our commitment to further deepen the India-Russia special and privileged strategic partnership. I look forward to hosting Putin in India later this year. So the problem with going hard against certain nations is you push them towards your enemies. You know, the friend, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type thing. And anyway, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Something like that. So the US has also so Trump's been going around saying he's doing all of these many deals at the moment, and one of the deals he took credit for unfairly was the Armenia-Azerbaijan one, which was kind of broadly done by themselves and working in close cahoots with Turkey. And they all did that. And then they went for the signing the deal thing in the White House and then said, let's give Trump a Nobel Peace Prize. Of course, Trump really had very little to do with this, but he's desperate for the Nobel Peace Prize. He took the plaudits for that. And this is what he said: I look forward to hosting, and he ended up doing this, President of Azerbaijan and Prime Minister of Armenia at the White House tomorrow for the historic peace summit. These two nations have been at war for many years, resulting in the deaths of thousands of people. Many leaders have tried to end the war with no success until now, thanks to all caps Trump in inverted commas. I mean, it's literally what people call, it's literally your name. Drumpf is actually your name, but Trump is your new name. So, like, I don't understand why that's in all caps and inverted commas. Anyway, you didn't end that war. It's not thanks to you. And this really irritates me that he does this. My administration has been engaged with both sides for quite some time. Tomorrow, President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan will join me at the White House for the special signing ceremony. The United States will also sign bilateral agreements with. Now, here's the interesting part. So what Trump, and part of me, if it like the cynical, amoral person in me thinks, you know, if you're an American, Trump is bullying other countries to get things for America that might end up being for the benefit of America, at least in a short-term transactional monetary sense, right? So he's screwed over, he's extorted Ukraine for its mineral deposits. He's getting Russia to pimp out their own oil reserves now to America to get them on side, blah, blah, blah. He's basically going around the world bullying people. Now, if you don't have a problem with bullying, then you look at the stuff that the bully is getting, like all the lunch money from all these other countries, and you're thinking, oh, that's awesome. And if you are the bully's mate, so if you are Americans, you might look at that lunch money that your man has got and think, he's doing all right. Actually, Trump is a strong leader. Well, Trump knows how to bully. He is your real estate mogul. We're going to return to this because someone was saying as soon as the politics isn't in the context of or isn't understood by being a real estate mogul trying to do a real estate deal, he's not very good at doing politics. So something like last night in Alaska was poor because it's not about bullying. You should be understanding what Ukraine needs. You should understand what Russia wants, and you should be using your morality as well as your politics and your leverage to get the best outcome, rather than just think, how can we screw over either of these to get as much money as possible? And that's still where Trump is. So when it comes to like supposedly being responsible for the Armenia-Azerbaijan deal, actually what you're there is to have a big signing and then leverage them to extort as much out of them as possible. The United States will also sign bilateral agreements with both countries to pursue economic opportunities together so we can fully unlock the potential of the South Caucasus region. I'm very proud of these courageous leaders for doing the right thing for the great people of Armenia and Azerbaijan. You can give a monkey's ass about them. It will be a historic day for Armenia, Azerbaijan, the US, and the world. See you then. So the US will receive exclusive development rights to a new transit corridor through Armenia as part of the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace deal to be signed today in Washington with Trump's mediation. The agreement also includes a dissolution of the Minsk Group, which has mediated the conflict since 1992. So I wonder whether, now here's a bit of cynicism from me, and I'm not kind of giving Trump props, but I wonder whether this kind of stuff used to go on just beneath the radar, where the US foreign policy, the State Department and CIA and all these mechanisms that the US has and has had would be feverishly trying to do this and leverage and get trade deals. I mean, the US has its finger in all sorts of pies around the world. The thing is, you didn't used to hear about it. Now, what Trump does now is he's doing the bullying in public. So where the bullying probably used to happen in smoky, dark rooms, meeting between these countries, and you'd have the US putting pressure on these countries, freaking Trump is doing that on Truth Social now. And like the cynic in me wonders whether the politics hasn't really changed, but our perception is changing because Trump is now bringing it all out in the open and doing the bullying in the open. And he bullies these nations on Truth Social until he gets what he wants. So it's kind of a different way of doing the same thing. I don't know what you guys think about that. Yeah, and it's exactly correct. You know, as Who's Poppin says, the US had nothing to do with Azerbaijan and Armenia working together. That was Turkey, absolutely. But he takes the plaudits at the end and says, "Well done, me. Look at how cool I am." Anyway, that's my kind of like just stream of consciousness thinking on the US there, that he's maybe brought some of that leverage that always did happen much more obviously out in the open. And you're seeing it get played out in real time on social media. Now, the US is to auction $300 million Russian oligarch yacht. I've talked about this before. After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, that it's I think first of its kind to happen in this way. Possibly the Anadea yacht, valued at more than 300 million, was seized from sanctioned Kremlin-linked Russian billionaire Suleiman Kerimov in April 2022. Now, it's going to have been expensive for the US to have kept that, right? So you'd want to offload this sooner rather than later. I think this should have been done a long time ago. I do wonder about, you know, that's a $300 million yacht. Let's assume you're going to have to, I think you're going to have to sell that off at an absolute bargain. Because if I was a billionaire, first of all, I want to buy my own, build my own to my own specs. And second of all, I mean, if I was a billionaire, I wouldn't be going around buying lots. That's not the way I do things. But second of all, you may be a penny pincher. Some are, and that's how they get to be billionaires. They're very good at looking after their money. So you might go after something like this. But I'll be thinking, right, I've essentially got an absolute song, this very expensive yacht for cheap as chips, and old Kerimov is back in Moscow, really deeply pissed off with me because I've got his yacht and I've paid peanuts for it. And so I could just imagine, like, this is oligarch war, and Kerimov is going to be like, I'm going to sabotage that yacht. I'm going to put some limpet mines on it. Or maybe he comes to me and says, oh, actually, now you bought my old yacht, can I have a timeshare in it? Can I have it every third weekend or something? I don't know. Anyway, lots to think about there. Ukraine and the US are preparing 3 joint mineral extraction projects, aiming to launch them within 18 months. So this is Ukrainian, the extortion for mineral deposits. I would argue Ukrainian Prime Minister Syridenko and US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also discussed expanding the US-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund, including investments in defense. And there could be some benefit there. Now, we're going to go on to Peter Thiel. He is one of the South African oligarchs. You've got Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and David Sachs, all horrible people, in my opinion, and all insanely influential in the Trump administration for different reasons, right? David Sachs with crypto, Elon Musk with Twitter, funding of 290 million for the campaign, and you all know that. And Peter Thiel being charged with Palantir, one of the most dangerous, I think, organizations in the world, has all the data on everyone in the US pretty much. Now, Peter Thiel apparently, and I need to look into this, fact check, you know, grain of sand, pinch of salt, grain of sand, pinch of salt and all that. Peter Thiel is funding the think tank currently writing the manifesto for Nigel Farage and the first budget of a reform government. Don't misunderstand how connected all these things are around the world. So when you look at the rise of Nigel Farage and reform and right-wing populism in the UK, when you look at the rise of the right-wing populism in Germany and in Hungary, you know, and you see the Heritage Foundation in the US, and you see the rise of MAGA republicanism there. These are all connected. Steve Bannon, when after he left the White House in Trump 1.0, went to Europe to try and strategically build up an infrastructure for right-wing populist political parties. This is all part of a spiderweb of plans, and I'm not being conspiratorial here. It is the way it is. So Peter Thiel, supposedly here, funding the think tank, currently writing the manifesto for Nigel Farage and the first budget of the reform government. And remember, Peter Thiel is a techno-fascist, a techno-authoritarian. That is a technical term. It's not just like he doesn't believe. He says that liberalism is dead, and that this is the, you know, it should be the birth of techno-authoritarianism, where technological companies like Palantir, for example, get to dictate policy and governance. In fact, democracy is not needed. The will of the people is not needed. It should be technological companies, tech companies that do this. That is tech authoritarianism. Peter Thiel's right at the heart of this. This should worry the shit out of you. This is really scary stuff. Nigel Farage is just another puppet of a global far right-wing populist movement funded by rich Americans. And this is on the back of Peter Thiel here, you know, in Hungary with Viktor Orban. Oh, look, there's Peter Thiel there. There's Viktor Orban. The guy on the left is the former Chancellor of Austria. Again, you've got, you know, FPO in Austria. These are like peas in a pod, who resigned in 2021 due to corruption allegations regarding suspected bribery and breach of trust. You know, these are the people that are gaining more and more and more and more power in the world. And it is incredibly, incredibly worrying. Okay, on to this. Now, I'd love to play you this, but it's 2 minutes here. I'm just going to give you Aaron Rupar's synopsis. It's an Australian reporter here speaking to Tammy Bruce. Tammy Bruce is a spokeswoman for the DHS, for the Secretary of State. He says to her, it seems our Prime Minister, so that's Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, can't even get a meeting with your president. What does this say about the way the US now views some of its relationships with its so he wants to say former allies, and then he says with its traditional allies. So this is a very pointed question, but we are no longer allies with you. People like liberal democracies in the Western world are not friends of the United States anymore. By your own making, Trump prefers Putin. Trump prefers Viktor Orban. Trump prefers Xi Jinping. Trump prefers Kim Jong-un and these sorts of people than he does traditional allies of the US. If we can't get a meeting with him, yet he goes around with freaking Bukele from El Salvador, he gets a meeting just fine, thank you very much. What the hell does this say? And we've now got reports coming out from US reports, Trump government reports, that are saying that Germany's more oppressive than El Salvador, and that they've whitewashed Russia's own human rights abuses. So they're whitewashing human rights abuses, presumably because the US wants to do those same human rights abuses. So this is that in Russia now that gay people are seen as extremist terrorists, and they want to outlaw essentially anything that doesn't fit in with traditional values. Well, that's exactly what MAGA wants to do. So they whitewash those human rights abuses in Russia, show that will claim that Germany's more oppressive than El Salvador, ship off all the people they don't like to brown-skinned people to gulags in El Salvador for spurious reasons, and the US is becoming more and more like an authoritarian dictatorial state that wants to eschew human rights. It is really, really worrying. And the problem is people love it when Trump does it, but didn't love it before Trump didn't do it. And you get this post hoc rationalization, this after the fact rationalization that is quite extraordinary. So this is, more than obvious. These folks are insanely stupid. What's worse, pedotus. Trump, King of Kings, God of Gods, has access to push that button. Trump is literally quite possibly 1 point above the line where mental retardation is measured. If not, he probably cheated the test also. And this possibly reference as well to he keeps asking people who are actually vastly cleverer than he is. You know, he keeps saying to people who have got like law degrees and stuff like that, you know, whether it be Letitia James or AOC or not Jessica Tarlov, Jasmine Crockett, people like this, you need to go and sit the test. I sat a test and I aced it. And the test he sat was a dementia test, asking him whether that's an elephant and that's a rhinoceros type thing. Really simple. And he keeps saying, I aced that test, they would fail it. It's like, dude, you know, that person's qualified for the bar and, you know, he's got a law degree. Like oh my goodness. Anyway, but the post-hoc rationalization going on here, the cognitive dissonance reduction is very obvious here. So this is when Trump sent two nuclear submarines to kind of saber rattle against, you know, North Korea, Russia, China, etc., etc. Now Biden just sent nuclear submarine. This is the Paul Shipula back in 2023. Biden just sent nuclear submarines to South Korea as a deterrent to North Korea. This unnecessary escalation will only bring us closer to nuclear war. God help us. And then when Trump did the same thing, President Trump says the US is prepared for nuclear war. As terrifying as that sounds, being prepared for it is how you keep peace. Same thing, two entirely different appraisals, because one was done by Biden and one was done by Trump. When Trump did it, it's amazing. When Biden did it, it sucks. Anyway, I just thought that was a quite an interesting insight into the thinking of some of these people. Okay, now let's get you to, I'm going to stop sharing that screen. I'm going to share another screen. We'll go and look at some of your comments in a second, and then we're going to go to essentially to Alaska, and we're going to look back at that. I'm going to get rid of all of those. I don't need to talk about them again. So that's gone. Bear with me while I find the right. Here we go. So we need him. That's going to be that one. Okay, we're going to share that. But I'm not going to go there just yet. I'm not going to give you some Tucker Carlson heebie-jeebies just at the moment. I just want to say thank you to Johnny Nevregard. Really appreciate your support. I haven't said that for a long time, so thanks, Johnny. Thanks as well to Michael Vuchar. Really good to have you on board again, gifting very generously 10 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, thank you, thank you, for your kindness, Michael. Finnish guys, still here. Russia delenda est. They do need to be indeed. Thanks for being here still, Finnish guy. Okay, so what else? Oh no, this is a good time for my what a wonderful time for my mouse to run out of batteries. Thank you, mouse. Okay, let's go to see if there's anything. We're going to talk about this in a second, actually. So Jonathan should end the podcast with thank you for your attention to this matter. This is a riff on Trump ending his tweets with that. We're going to talk about it in the context of Gavin Newsom in a second, because he started writing some tweets in all caps, and he has his press team taking the mickey out of. In fact, let's do that now. Because I like to draw connections. I did have this for later on, but I think this is a good time to do this. So thanks for this, Tom. Let's get rid of your comments. So, okay, let's share with you. It looks like Tucker Carlson, but it's not going to be. It's going to be this. Right. So this is a Gavin Newsom new style tweet that he does in the form of a Trump Truth Social post, and this is his analysis, Gavin Newsom's analysis of the Alaska summit. Now, what's interesting is a reaction to what Gavin Newsom is doing. Because when Gavin Newsom does it, oh, this is juvenile speaking like this, blah, blah, blah. When Trump does it, it's amazing. Okay, so Trump just fled the podium with Putin. No questions, nothing. Total low energy. The man looked like he'd just eaten 3 buckets of KFC with Vlad. Is he afraid the press will ask about me, America's favorite governor, and the fact I stole the cameras this week with the maps? So loads of things in scare quotes. Instead of stealing the election, it's stealing the cameras. And many people are saying he begged Putin to hold his hands, tiny, on the way out. Admit it, Donny J, you're terrified because this was the worst week of your life because of me, Gavin C. Newsom. The maps will, and so the maps, by the way, is talking about the gerrymandering that's going to take place. So Trump said he wanted to find 5 new House of Representative seats by gerrymandering, and he openly admitted this. He openly called for Texas to gerrymander, to change the districts so that you can win more seats with fewer votes, by just making sure that all the Democrats are in this one like contorted district, right? So you're front loading one district, so you lose that district, but you don't get those Democrats voting these other 3 districts where they could have won another 3 districts, right? So you front load them into this weird shaped district, then they only win 1, and now the Republicans win another 3. Now, both sides have done this over time. So you go up to say Illinois, that's heavily gerrymandered in favor of the Democrats. So both sides have done this, but you don't do it when it usually happens is after you get a census, and the census happens every 10 years, 2010, 2020, 2030, right? You don't do it mid-census. It's 2025 mid-census, and Texas are trying to do this, redistrict their areas. Now, this happens at state level, and because the Republicans run more states than the Democrats, actually gerrymandering is done more by Republicans. It is or is potentially done by able to be done more by Republicans than Democrats. So what you've got here is an interesting situation where Gavin Newsom said, right, if you're going to gerrymander in Texas, we're going to gerrymander in California, and we will win even more than 5 seats. So then you've got some Republican, including Florida, some Republican states like Ron DeSantis saying, well, we're going to gerrymander there. The problem is, if you get for this tit for tat, the Republicans eventually will win. But if you just roll over and then let the Republicans do this, then you show no spine. So Gavin Newsom is coming out saying, I'm going to fight for the Democrats, and we are going to gerrymander back for you. We know it's wrong, but we're going to fight fire with fire. And actually, this has got large support from Democrats, both voters and other lawmakers. So then what happened in Texas is that in order to gerrymander the state of Texas, they have to vote on it. And Texas has more Republican, even though because of gerrymandering, there are 45% of votes in Texas are Democrat, but the Democrats only have something like 21% or whatever it is of seats there. And in the Texas Senate, Texas, not the actual senators of Texas as a state, but in the Texas State Senate, even though they're the minority in the Senate there, if they don't vote, then you're not quorum. If they don't turn up to vote, then it's not quorum, so you can't have a vote. So the Texas lawmakers have just run off. So Democratic lawmakers have run off to Illinois, actually, I think it is, where J.B. Pritzker is, the Democrat governor there, billionaire. He's putting these guys up, hiding them away, so that it's not quorum in Texas, so they can't vote to gerrymander. And like, this is the right thing to do, even though it's like civilly like problematic, having, running away from voting. So anyway, you've got this massive battle. I'm trying to give you the full context here. You've got this massive battle over maps, which is why Gavin Newsom keeps mentioning the maps here. So going back to his comment, I stole the cameras this week with the maps. Many people are saying he begged Putin to hold his hands tiny on the way out. Admit it, Donny J, you were terrified because this was the worst week of your life because of me, Gavin C. Newsom. The maps will end your presidency, retake Congress for the people, and expose your rigged little game. And my perfect maps are more beautiful than anything in Trump Tower, which many say smells weird. Stephen Chung, who's an advisor to Trump and is a really bad human being, explained this disaster. Enjoy your flight home, Donald. You're Putin's problem now. I'm America's solution. GCN. And he keeps doing like tweets like this and ends it with, he didn't end that one, but he says, thank you for your attention to this matter. And so anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Now, in response to this, Fox News, very interesting. When Trump does it, it's fine. But when Fox News see Newsom doing this, it's,
guarantees. That's just the bottom line in all of this. Gavin Newsom, meantime, posting this on X, Liz, using all capitals, of course, trying to mock Trump, use Trump style. He's been doing this for a while now. He says, quoting, Trump just fled the podium with Putin. No questions, nothing. Total low energy. The man looked like he'd just eaten 3 buckets of KFC with Vlad. Admit it, Donnie J. You're terrified because this was the worst week of your life because of me, Gavin C. Newsom. I think he's trying to be funny. I don't know what he's trying to do, but it comes across as childish. And you're the governor of the biggest state in the union. What are you doing?
Honestly, I feel like
And what's depressing here is like what he's doing is he's using the exact language of Donald Trump. So if you're saying you're childish, you're the governor of California, he should be saying you're childish, you're the president of the United States. When he calls Gavin Newsom, Gavin Newscum, when he calls Schiff, Shifty Schiff, when he calls people juvenile school ground names, you don't get that Fox commentator having a go at him for doing that. So this is absolute rank hypocrisy from these abject tools.
He's trying so hard to be Trump, but he's coming off like Kanye West. He seems absolutely insane.
He guarantees that
it doesn't seem insane. Like, anyway, that's my tuppence. Right, going back to what I was going to talk to you about, and hopefully, you know, that gave you a bit of context into what's going on. I don't know if I was going to play Mearsheimer. John Mearsheimer is this political realist. You've got Jeffrey Sachs, who's an economist, who's a political realist, and John Mearsheimer. These people have now become absolutely overt shills for Russia. They don't even pretend anymore. So he's on Tucker Carlson just regurgitating Russian talking points, and it's sickening. I'm not going to play it, but Mearsheimer says the Russophobia of the West is so powerful at this point in time, and he goes on to say that Russia has won this war and that Ukraine and NATO are responsible for the conflict because of NATO expansion. Quite literally, Russian Foreign Ministry readout. It's highly depressing to see that. Now, this is this is in the context of more going back to geopolitics, not so much about, you know, Alaska or Ukraine particularly, but I just want to give you a sense of, I mean, there is an element that we can connect to Ukraine here, but it's certainly the way that the US sees allies at the moment, and it's transactional. And Scott Bessent is he's expanding on Trump's transactionalism here, by seeing allies as essentially a tool to generate wealth for the US sovereign wealth fund. And he actually talks in these terms. This is, as Arnaud Bertrand says, this is, without exaggerating, one of the most extraordinary things a US Treasury Secretary has ever said. It should be mandatory viewing for all citizens of US allies, Europeans first and foremost. What Bessent is saying is that the US will now treat US allies' wealth as an American sovereign wealth fund, his words, directing them largely at the US president's discretion how to use their money in order to build American factories and reshore American industries. So all these trade deals that have been done, you've heard this with regard to Japan, you've heard this with regard to the EU, like all of these, like Japan is $500 million, EU is $600 million. It's going to be money that they're going to spend in the US, and they're going to be using that essentially as a sovereign wealth fund. Although the reality is that neither entity, like South Korea, no, it is South Korea and Japan, I think, and the EU, none of these entities actually has there been any actual text of these deals, and we're unsure that this is actually a thing that they've signed up to. But this is Scott Bessent saying it here.
We have these agreements in place where the Japanese, the Koreans, and to some extent the Europeans will invest in companies and industries that we direct them largely at the president's discretion.
And how's that work? I mean, it's almost like an offshore appropriation. I'm not sure we've ever had anything like that in the States before.
Larry Kudlow is literally saying this looks like offshore appropriation. You're appropriating funds of other countries from offshore. And like, I'm not sure we've ever seen this. No, because it's outrageous.
Consulted with the, I don't know, the Senate Finance Committee or the House Ways and Means Committee, or what?
Well, Larry, I think a good framing of that is other countries, in essence, are providing us with a sovereign wealth fund. So
they're going to buy our goods.
Well,
that's essentially what's going on.
Well,
or wait, let me step back. They're going to build our factories. They're going to help us to build new factories, which Mr. Trump loves.
Exactly. So the way to think about it is these huge surpluses accumulated offshore. Let's take Japan.
They're not surpluses that are accumulated offshore. Like, you don't understand a surplus here. Like, they don't have a whole bunch of money just sitting in an account. Oh, we've got a surplus this year. It's a trade surplus. It's like they are selling to the US more than they're buying off the US, right? But it doesn't mean, like, Like Vietnam has a trade surplus, which is why they were absolutely hammered by these tariffs, because the tariffs were linked to the trade surplus or trade deficits, not to reciprocal tariffs, which is what was originally claimed. So Vietnam sells more stuff to, because all those cheap clothes, sneakers and whatever are sold to the US because the US wants to buy them from Vietnam, not from China. They actually asked for Vietnam to start providing these things as part of a strategic plan for the region. But then Trump comes along saying, hang on, how's Vietnam selling us more stuff than they're buying? Well, it's because they're poor and they don't buy much stuff off the US because they can't freaking afford it, right? You are buying more off them because you can afford it. So Vietnam doesn't have billions of dollars sitting in a bank because they're selling more stuff to the US than they're buying. They buy more from other countries in the region, right? They're not buying food from the US because they're not near enough to buy food. You can sell clothes to the US because you can ship them in containers and it takes 2 months to get there, whatever. Like, this is so like, if Scott Bessent's a Treasury Secretary and he's saying they've got these trade surpluses sitting around that they can spend in our country, he just doesn't have a clue what's going. Like, this is the guy in charge of the Treasury. Jesus H. Christ.
We're going to have 550 billion, and they will be reinvesting that back into the U.S. economy.
That isn't sitting in a bank. It's just the difference between what you buy and sell to America. But then you've got all the other countries, some that you've got deficits with, some that you've got surpluses with. And in the end, do you balance your books in the country? No. Most countries borrow money. Very few countries are operating on surpluses as a whole. But if you're talking about a surplus sitting in a bank that you can reinvest back into the US, that has to be a surplus that the country is making in a financial year. And they don't have $550 billion just sitting around waiting to invest in the US. You gargantuan dimwit.
We will be able to direct them as we reshore these critical industries. We are trying to de-risk the U.S. economy from what we saw during COVID.
President loves new factories. He'll take rehab.
Why is Larry Kudlow? Like, why am I some like 2-bit douchebag on the south coast of the UK, like an autodidact in terms of like global geopolitics? I'm no expert in global geopolitics, right? I haven't got a degree in geopolitics. Like, how am I able to challenge Scott Bessent and Larry Kudlow, who supposedly, like, he's worked in the government before, like, for Trump? He's supposedly some, like, at least some kind of economics knowledge. Can't work out that's absolute bullshit and doesn't challenge him one iota. Like, I don't understand this. How is the United States of America employing these people to run the country? Like, what is going on? I just want to swear. Not a lot. So with the percent, what Dissent is saying is the US will now treat US allies' wealth as an American sovereign wealth fund, his words, directing them largely at the US's president's direct discretion how to use their money in order to build American factories and reshore American industries. Yeah, because that's what we all want. We just want to build American factories for America, right? That's what the rest of the world wants to do. Even the Fox News host can't believe it, calling it offshore appropriation, another word for theft. That's exactly what it is. Straight up, unabashed colonial plunder. That's a pattern we see emerge. Unable to extract wealth or win wars against an increasingly strong global south, the US has turned inward to feast on its own allies who can't resist precisely because they depend on their exploiter for military protection. Now, this is interesting. So what might happen is there might be investments from these countries, but it's not like they've got the money sitting there, but they might end up having to invest because they feel if we don't invest, then the US becomes our enemy and we don't get their military protection. This is just bullying. But instead of bullying your enemies and people you don't like, the US has started bullying its friends and its allies. So they're as defenseless against American wealth extraction as any 19th century colony was against the colonial protector. That's exactly what I wrote in my latest article in Europe's Colonial Moment, says Arnaud Bertrand. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I thought I'd throw that one in there. Right, I know I've been already speaking too long. It's been an hour and we haven't even got onto Alaska. So let's do so and talk Alaska now. I'm just going to very quickly, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the batteries in my mouse because I'm sure I've got my electrics bag from when I went on holiday just down by my feet. And that would be lucky, wouldn't it? Talk amongst yourselves. I'll tell you what. So, class, you've got some homework that you need to do, and it needs to be. Where have I put? Ah, here it is. Talk amongst yourselves, but please make sure you're on topic. I want you talking about global geopolitics and not, you know, who you snogged at the weekend or whatever. Thank you, class. I appreciate. Thank you for your attention to this matter. 2 batteries are now going to be exchanged here. This is how to run a vlog. This is how to have a YouTube channel, which is talk absolute nonsense while changing batteries on a mouse. I bet you don't see, you know, Brian Tyler Cohen do this because, you know, he has teams of people waiting on him, no doubt. I've got a casual cup of tea made by Helen's dad, Ivan, and in fact, I had one this morning. It's beautiful. Oh, it's good to be back at home and have a bit of Yorkshire tea on the cards. Here we go. Oh, I've got my mouse back. Yay! Well done, me. Anyway, did you have a good time talking about what you wanted to talk about? I hope so. Right. Okay. So now we're going to go to Alaska, and we're going to talk peace negotiations. Before we do that, just going to drop into you guys. Thank you, Daryl. It's good to have you back, my man. We need to wake up. America, Russia, and others have one goal. Sorry, I can't speak. I can't read. One goal, and that is to destroy democracy and create a right-wing world's order. I do think there is something. So this is basically Anne Applebaum. Her latest book, Autocracy Inc., like talks about this, which is it may not be overt, as in it may not be what's the word? Conscious. There may not be conscious decisions of leaders to go and meet up with other leaders and create some kind of international Illuminati cabal. But autocratic leaders, you know, birds of a feather stick together. And autocratic leaders like the look of each other, and they can get away with murder, literally, by hanging out with other people who like to get away with murder. And so you get this movement towards other people who won't hold you to account because you're not going to hold them to account for human rights abuses and this and that. So you are getting this growth of nations around the world who are embracing autocracy over democracy. Democracy is difficult. You've got to fight for democracy, and it has disadvantages in dealing with stuff like this because you can't deal with ne'er-do-well nations in the world off the legal pathway, whereas they can do what they like. This is kind of like the difference between Ukraine and Russia. So we can bring this back to talking about Ukraine and Russia here. So Russia is able to fight the war in Ukraine by breaking international laws. So they commit war crimes and they do horrific things. And actually that gives them a strategic advantage because actually sometimes horrific things can be strategically beneficial on a battlefield or in war or whatever. You can imagine a situation where, like, if you break the rules, you end up being in a better place than someone who didn't break the rules. And this is almost like the free rider concept in psychology and economics. That societies can only allow a certain amount of free riders. So, for example, if you have donuts not for free, but an honesty box for donuts on the side there of the bar, right? You can get away with, say, like 1 in 10 people not putting money in and nicking a donut. But as soon as you get to a point where most people are nicking donuts, then the whole thing falls apart, right? And no one's going to produce those donuts, and the whole system breaks. So systems of honesty and decency and morality can get away with only so many free riders before it all goes wrong, right? All goes Pete Tong. Are we at a stage in the world at the moment where there are going to get too many free riders, autocratic regimes, that like the world just falls apart, the international world order falls apart? So going back anyway, I sort of sidelined myself there after sidelining myself from sidelining myself, sidebarring myself. And now I'm doing another meta sidebar, talking about whether sidebar or sideline is the correct word. That's how annoying I am as a human being. So Ukraine has to fight this war without like free riding. It has to do it honestly and abiding by the rules, and that is a disadvantage to it in certain circumstances. I'm not advocating breaking the rules. I'm not advocating war crimes. What I'm saying is that, you know, for a side that has to adhere to all the rules stringently, because otherwise they don't get international aid coming their way, they are at a disadvantage to a side that has all the options open to it. Right? Russia has all the options open to it, and so. Yeah, that is annoying for Ukraine. Anyway, there's a slight connection there, but you get the general point I was talking is that that I was discussing is that there are nations that are starting to break the international rules-based world order or the international rules, and they're getting away with it. And we need the UN to be strong and robust. We need the UN to vote out Russia from the Security Council. We need and the UN as a whole, and then re-enter the UN as a Russian Federation, not as a Soviet Union, as Talaria has said on previous videos. We need to get back to a strong rules-based order around the world, and unfortunately, as Anna Applebaum is pointing out, you know, it's looking more and more dubious as the weeks and months go on. Right, BME, thanks to have you, and thanks, by the way, Daryl. Just a little something for the next bottle. Taco is just disgraceful. Slava Ukraini. I thought you were just having to go at actual tacos, because I've just been on holiday eating tacos a few times. And I was like, oh, they're all right. They're not disgraceful. Oh, no, you're talking about Trump. Okay. No, thanks, BME. Appreciate that. And thanks for your support. March for Humanity. Hey, mate. JP, you bring in so many disgusting USA updates. It's about freaking me out. It's really difficult not to, and I'm obsessed with the US in terms of like rubbernecking a car crash. You can't help but look at it, slow down and look at it, and then you're helping to cause the traffic jam. Like I am obsessed with the US, particularly when it goes wrong, and so I was obsessed with the Trump regime in 2016 to 2020, and I'm obsessed with the Trump regime from 2024 to 2028. It's just an obsession I have. But the problem is it really, really, really does affect, as we saw last night, the war in Ukraine. It affects international trade. It affects allies and alliances. It affects national security, NATO. Like the US is at the center of everything, whether we like it or not. So the question is, now that it's become unreliable, can the EU, can Europe, actually EU plus, can Europe step up to be at the center of their own national security provision, to be at the center of their own rules-based order and economic network? Is EU strong enough to be able to stand up on its own when all the other big players are not playing by the rules? So we get back, actually, this is all kind of my streams of consciousness occasionally circle back to make sense. I don't know they always do, but this is kind of making sense now. So like the idea about when you have donuts on the side, if too many people are free riding and nicking the donuts and not paying into the honesty box, and it all falls apart. Like if the EU are the last bastions of democracy around the world, so you've got Russia getting involved and causing coups across the Sahel in Africa, you've got BRICS getting together with all these ne'er-do-well nations, and you've got Brazil like seeming to wanting to side more with Russia due to economic reasons than with Ukraine. We've got the US falling off a cliff there, and you've got maybe Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and the EU and UK. But it depends how Nigel Farage does, and does he start us on the way to right-wing populism? And the same with all these nations around Europe. Like Europe is the last and I said this previously, and people might think I'm being too pro EU. I'm not. I'm actually like literally thinking about where democracy is dying around the world and where it is thriving around the world. And I don't think it's thriving particularly anywhere, but it's clinging on in Europe in the form of the EU. And there are enough checks and balances to keep it together, because actually it's that kind of organization. If it's an individual country, actually it'd be easier for it to just fall away like the United States. So the question is the EU able to hold on and remain as a bastion of democracy? Or if that goes, is that all the donuts are gone and everyone's nicked them, and we are now into the territory of a new era, an unknown world of, or maybe it's not unknown, maybe it's a world before liberal democracies took hold, and we're going back to feudal times. Really, this is what I concern myself with. So that is why, unfortunately, I spend so much time talking about the United States, because it's a bit of a barometer, but it's not just a barometer reflecting how the pressure around the world, but it's also driving the pressure around the world, and it's that important. Mal, I saw Trump's antics on the red carpet last night, embarrassing and an utter disgrace to the free world. But then the USA isn't part of the free world now, makes you appreciate the majority of our leaders in Europe. Yes, but then I get on to worrying about how long that can last or will last. But anyway, there you go. And please don't get me started. Don't get me started. Okay. So getting on to just reading Starmer. Yeah. So before we talk about Alaska, I talked about this, and I predicted Starmer would flatter Trump, and I predicted the Europeans would flatter Trump because it's still the only way to go at the moment. So Starmer did exactly what I predicted, which was one. And I did this live, not live because it was a pre-record, but I hadn't seen Starmer's statement, and it flashed up. And I said, I predict Starmer will, one, massage Trump's ego, and two, then reassert Europe's desires to see Ukraine have X, Y, and Z. And Starmer's statement did exactly that. And this is, so while Trump still holds the cards, because America is the nation it is, and it is the heart of NATO. Is it not just the heart? It's the hearts and brains of NATO to many, for all intents and purposes. While Trump and the US hold the cards still, the rest of the world who are allied to the US are beholden to the whims of its leader. And so whether we like it or not, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, has to call him daddy. Whether we like it or not, they have to fawn over Trump in public. Like, I don't like that. It sucks. But actually, you start standing up to Trump and he will hate you for it. And you're then pushing him towards Putin. Honestly, it's so sad. It's sad that this is reality, but it's what Starmer and European leaders have to do. It honestly is. And that's coming from someone who despises Trump. I despise Trump. And I would, if I was the leader of the UK, I figure I would have to do exactly what Starmer did. I hope I would say something, or I would twitch in a way that I'm, when people are recording stuff on camera and they're hostages, and they make a sign so that someone somewhere knows that they're saying it's under duress. I would say what I'd have to say and fawn over Trump, but I would make a sign that I was saying it's under duress, because it's sickening. But anyway, just read Starmer flattering Trump. After making a fool of himself, he needs them to flatter him to undo the damage. I'm not looking forward to seeing them humiliating themselves to prop him up. But I would, although, I get your frustration here, Kaz, but I actually disagree. Because he has to do that because that's who Trump is. Trump is nuts. Trump is a narcissist. But if you don't understand that he's a narcissist and recognize that you have to verbally give him fellatio, like if you don't understand that, then you are not going to be able to get what you want in this world right now. Now, the one good thing here is that because Trump is like that, and if you do that, effectively you can manipulate him. So what you do by fawning over him, and by Tim Cook giving him literally a piece of gold, is that you are buying him. You either buy him with flattering words, or you buy him with gold. Here's a man that is easily bought. You just need to bribe him, and that's the reality of it. Like, I could go into, I don't know, let's say I could go into Afghanistan or Iraq or somewhere at the moment, right? And I could say to the policeman, what do you mean I have to pay you a pack of cigarettes or $50 to get through this checkpoint? What do you mean I have to do that? I'm not standing for that. That's disgusting. And then the policeman shoots me in the face. Or I pay the guy a packet of cigarettes, get through the border checkpoint, and then say, this sucks. We need to change this. But I don't change it by standing up to the policeman there and then. So we all want this situation with Trump to change. But if you're going to call him out in public, you will be on the losing side. Like, if Starmer was to call Trump out in public, we might go, yes, thankfully, someone's got some absolute bloody spine. It's taken too long for someone to have spine. But you'll find that the UK would get another 20% tariffs on them because Trump is a bully. And what I'm saying is, at the moment, we have to do what the bully says. And do you know how much that breaks my heart to say that? Like, what you could do is get all of the EU and UK and Norway and Australia and Japan and South Korea to try and stand together and say with a unified voice, Trump, stop doing this. You're nuts and it's horrible. But then he'll turn us into the enemy and just start being nice to BRICS. And then you've got America on absolutely the wrong side. And he's so volatile that the more you push him, the more he goes towards your enemies with open arms. And this is just really, really dangerous. So I've got a kind of realpolitik version of this, but I understand that is morally distasteful. It's kind of consequentialist, which is like doing something horrible for the greater good. We need to get to here. And at the moment, we need to polish Trump's shoes in order to get here. But I hate the fact that we have to polish Trump's shoes in order to get to here. And what we need to do is make sure that Trump never gets voted in, nor anyone like him ever again in the United States of America. The lesson learned here should be that Trump is a bad human being and he should not be in charge of the United States. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm not showing myself to be a bad person. Kaz replies, Michael G-Chart replies, this is a flawed argument. Trump will never go fully BRICS. It removes a need. Yeah, I don't know that he will go fully BRICS, but he will go fully anti-Europe and fully anti-UK, especially if Starmer just said that on his own. We would end up with 50% tariffs. Guaranteed. If Starmer went all guns blazing, we might say, yeah, brilliant. But the UK will get absolutely trounced. And yeah, that's not cool. So it's just really, really difficult. Yeah, classic gamer moment, big explosion to put out the fire. Yeah, I don't know. It is difficult. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. For the time being, we need direct dialogue with Trump in the interim, and that's the thing. Like at the moment, we need the Americans. Right, and while he's got the Senate completely unwilling to stand against him, like you see the people that they are voting through. So yeah, and when you've got the House of Representatives only with a wafer thin margin, but when you still have them propping him up, there's not a lot that we can hope for internally. Now it might be different after 2026. The midterm elections might give a very different flavor of American politics. But right now, he's got the trifecta. And that makes it very difficult to stand up to Trump internally or externally. Okay, so let's now go back to, but having just said that, I'm just about to spend the rest of this going to town on Trump. Sean Pinnett. So remind ourselves of the lead up to Alaska. So first of all, it took place in Alaska. And the Russian news went mental about this. So Russian news, as in the Twitter handle, said the West once bragged about isolating Russia. Now Moscow is dictating the agenda for a major summit right on American soil. Russia writes history, not headlines. So like I said to you before in my previous videos and on the live last night with Greg Terry, Russia had already won this by this actually A, taking place. It shouldn't have taken place. And B, on American soil. And a red carpet being rolled out by American soldiers on their knees to a megalomaniacal, murderous dictator. So, yeah, that is how the Russians saw it. Then you had Sergei Lavrov turning up with the CCCP, Soviet Union sweatshirt. That is, two fingers in the face of the Americans. Lavrov's USSR sweater in Alaska is a clear nod to the Putin regime's imperial ambitions. They're stuck in the past and want to pull Ukraine and Belarus back with them, forgetting we are free nations that will never return to their brotherhood. Dictators cannot be appeased. Well, I think they can. And what we saw last night is actually they could be appeased. But Lavrov there, again, these were all little wins, each and every one of them. As I said to you earlier, Putin, before going to Alaska, went to a fish oil manufacturing facility where he spent ages being shown different jars of bloody oil, and then concerning himself with the minutiae of the local economy there. In other words, this was a purposeful insult to the importance of the Alaska summit. Again, these are mind games that Putin is so good at playing. Why was Keith Kellogg not there as an expert, the envoy to Ukraine? Why? Because he was seen as too pro-Ukraine. So you had a whole bunch of people there who ostensibly were not pro-Ukraine. Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, although you'd hope he's at least somewhat pro-Ukraine. But and then you had Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessant, who eventually it was whittled down from the 5, thankfully not including those last 2, and just ended up being a 3v3. Now, you already had before going to Alaska, Trump saying, I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. So he's saying very clearly, this is not for Ukraine. I'm not interested in bringing about things that are positive for Ukraine. I'm interested in stopping the killing, is what he keeps saying. But really what he's interested in is doing trade deals with Russia and essentially extorting them in the same way that he extorted Ukraine for the minerals deal. Then we had, on the way to Alaska, saying that I had a wonderful talk with highly respected President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. He's not highly respected. Most of the world hates him for being a murderous dictator. If you are saying he's highly respected, this is projection. You're projecting onto others your own psychology, and you believe that you highly respect him, Donald Trump. So the purpose of the call is to thank him for the release of 16 prisoners. We were also discussing the release of 1,300 additional prisoners. Our conversation was a very good one. We discussed many topics, including President Putin's visit to Alaska. I look forward to meeting Lukashenko in the future. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, as we showed on the live stream last night, there were 2 conversations that Lukashenko has been involved in the last week where he is taking the piss out of Trump. Now, for Trump to write this after 2 pretty horrific instances of public discourse from Lukashenko means that Trump is not being briefed. Because if Trump had known what Lukashenko would have had said, he wouldn't have said that. So we have a situation where Trump is fundamentally ignorant. He's not getting briefed. He is not an expert on these matters: Ukraine, Russia, geopolitics, Asia, Europe, Eurasia, so on and so forth. He is not knowledgeable enough on these matters. And nor are many of the people around him. Pete Hegseth, who interestingly wasn't invited. Why was Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, not invited to Alaska? Well, I would assume it's because he's ignorant as well. We found out in the last week that Pete Hegseth doesn't know where Kaliningrad is. He doesn't know of Kaliningrad. He's not heard of the Russian exclave, which is a nuclear threat to freaking Europe, which the US NATO command is very cognizant of. Now, if Pete Hegseth doesn't know and he's in charge of the Department of Defense, that is a rank embarrassment, right? So you've just got unserious people in charge of the United States of America at the moment. And I'd include Howard. Why the frick are you inviting Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, who is a joke of a human, to Alaska to talk with the Russians? Anyway, so you've got Trump very publicly showing that he respects dictators. And this goes back to what I said earlier. The US is moving much more closely and aligning themselves much more closely to the orbit of dictatorships around the world. And so going back to what Cass was saying earlier, like if we stand up to the US, and I know Michael says, well, they're not going to join BRICS. No, I'm not saying the US is going to join BRICS, but they will align. They are already aligning themselves more and more with each passing week, culturally and politically, with these places. That if the Western liberal world stands up to Trump very publicly, then you will only push him ever closer to the very people we want him to be distant from. That's the dilemma. So Keir Starmer, like many others, are faced with a dilemma. Do you clean his boots and keep him on side, or do you stand up for your principles but screw yourself over in the long run? We'd all like to say we'd stand up for our principles, but actually our principles, there is different levels of principles. They talk about this in psychology with like different order volition. where you like, I want to give up smoking, and you're like, you have these different orders, like, so I do this in order to do that, blah blah blah. But I might have a cheeky cigarette here, but then it falls in line with it, and you get different orders of volition. Anyway, I'm really going off on one. It's probably not the time to do that. But we have different orders of volition with, like, yeah, I really want to be a good, upstanding human being, but understand that sometimes I've got to take a hit here in order to be that good, upstanding human being and have more impact up here. It's moral consequentialism. Anyway, I digress yet again. So Eric Swalwell, representative Democrat here, saying, so he's taking a mickey. So before Trump even got to Alaska, he said this.
We're going to see what happens. We're going to have a meeting today. Hopefully it'll be good. If it's bad, if it's something I don't see a future in, I'm a deal guy. If it's something I don't see a future in, I'm gone. I'll leave. I don't have to do a press. I'll just say, not going to be a deal. I'm out of here. And I go back to the United States and I preside over the economy.
So he said twice that he was going to Russia, right? And yet he was going to Alaska. So that caused all that ruckus beforehand. And then he's on a plane to Alaska and he says, oh, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to go back to the United States. Alaska is in the United States. Like, what are you talking about? You're in the United States. Oh my God. Anyway, so then when he landed, well, of course, again, Putin was winning this even before they met. So all those things I've already talked about. Then, you know, it's happening in Alaska in a military base. You're inviting a dictator to a military base in Alaska, in the United States. And you roll the red carpet out for him, literally. And that was despicable. And I showed you all the memes of American soldiers now sort of rolling out red carpets and how disappointing that was for the optics. So then Putin doesn't turn up till 9 o'clock. So Putin keeps Trump waiting, keeps the Americans waiting. And this is Trump mind games 101. He's just winning. Then he gets off the plane and he's out shouted a question, but feigns that he can't hear. And the question is, when will you stop killing civilians in Ukraine? And this was asked by Rachel Scott of ABC. And that's brilliant. And we want to see more of that. Now, what was really interesting about the interaction is that every other world leader that has been invited to the US recently, normally to the White House, they have this press conference first where the press just starts asking really difficult questions. And then Trump and his lackeys have a go at the leader, or it's a bit of a free, you know, we've seen it with Starmer, Macron, Zelensky, the South African leader, is it Ramaphosa? It's not, is it still Ramaphosa? So on and so forth. And you didn't have that. It was just this really weird situation, a bit of talk, and then into the meeting, and then a short talk afterwards, but no questions to Putin. And Putin spoke first at the announcements, at the kind of pressers. Like, as unheard of that Putin would speak first, that the leader that you are inviting speaks first. Like all the other incidences where you've had power plays, where Trump has been just absolutely doing over people like Zelensky, those power plays have been very much designed to show American dominance. And this is the first time we have not seen that. And actually what you have is Putin and Russian dominance. It was pretty embarrassing. And in fact, it was deeply embarrassing to have RT laughing about this even before. Like, so this guy, so first of all, I think it's
we can
British.
see Air Force One. It's all on the tarmac. The Eagle has landed, but we haven't yet seen the lovely blonde orange hair of Donald Trump.
So taking a mickey out of his hair and blah, blah, blah. This is RT. What's the atmosphere like? And then right at the end of the talk, and he's kind of almost laughing about this and that. And then at the end, she says, because he talks about both the vehicles that are behind these big armored vehicles, the Beast. He says, well, look, this is a Russian armored vehicle. He says, this is the American armored vehicle. They're called the Beast. And they're parked pretty much next to each other. And she asks at the end, she jokes at the end, God, she says, imagine if they invite Putin on to into the Beast to drive it with Trump. Wouldn't that be hilarious? That's exactly what happened. So Putin is just laughing all the way to freaking Christmas. All his Christmases have come at once. Trump not only normalizes the relationship, claps him, welcomes him warmly, red carpet, shakes his hand. There's all this warm smiles and everything, but then invites him into the armored car, and they have a 10-minute drive around in the armored car with Putin beaming through the window. And she jokingly says, God, imagine if they invite him into that. And that's exactly what they did. It's absolutely embarrassing.
It'd be quite nice if Donald Trump met President Putin and said, hey, come in my car, I'll give you a ride.
Yeah, that's what happened. Literally what happened. So you can laugh all you like. That's how embarrassing it was. So then you start getting memes like this, right? So you might think I've got Trump derangement syndrome, that I'm just sitting here trying to find an opportunity to have a go at Trump. But literally, like, everyone apart from some people on like Newsmax is seeing this as an absolute Putin domination, right? These are the sorts of memes you're seeing widely on the internet. The red carpet meme is now like, this is Butcher. They've laid it out in the context of Butcher. Like, this is the optics for this whole Alaska thing were absolutely disastrous. Here are more optics where you've got on the left, this was it before, yay, and this was it afterwards. Trump looking wan, tired, hands again down by his side, same kind of stance, but like not the beaming smile he had before. Putin smiling afterwards. Some people saying that that's pretty reflective. What else do we have? Oh yeah, I just want to. Did this happen?
I'll end that war between those two countries in 24 hours. It won't even take that long. Mark my words, I'll stop that war in 24 hours.
You don't say mark my words if you're joking and being sarcastic. If I was being sarcastic, mark my. The only way I'd communicate that I was being sarcastic is to be overtly sarcastic in my voice. Mark my words. Yeah, mark my words. I will blah, 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 blah. But if you're saying, mark my words, I will stop that war within 24 hours, you mean it. So anyone that tells you that he didn't mean the 24 hours thing, which is now what he's coming up, oh, I was joking, they're lying.
I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine totally settled. I'll have it done in 24 hours. I would have a deal done in 24 hours from the time we started. And even now, I could solve that in 24 hours. I can do it in 24 hours. I know both players, and I can do that in 24 hours.
Could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Yes, I
How
could.
would you do that?
I know Zelensky very well. Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled.
So even before he arrived, well, 207 days later, he hasn't done it, so on and so forth. I mean, we need to not forget this, right? Like, so someone's saying, oh, you know, stop going about the 24 hours thing. No. Like, the man needs to be hoisted by his own petard. You freaking promised that, and you've so soundly failed to deliver. You need to explain to us how you failed and how you can get away with making these claims before you come into power and not be able to come true on your claims. Like, you need to accept that you wildly underestimated the complexity of global geopolitics. You need to own this, Trump, but you won't, because it's always someone else's fault. No, this is your fault for being deeply ignorant of the requisite knowledge to solve global catastrophes like this war. Do not let him off the hook. Now, if you want to really understand how bad Alaska was, think of one of the politicians who is one of the biggest stalwart defenders of Donald Trump. Is Trump 2.0, Boris Johnson. He's just written a column in the Daily Mail that says it's the most vomit-inducing episode in all the tawdry history of international diplomacy, but it will have taught Trump this vital lesson. If Boris Johnson is saying that it was a vomit-inducing episode last night, but it should have taught Trump a lesson, then that is saying something. Honestly, it was a disaster last night. Now, this guy on CNN, this is an intelligence analyst for global intelligence analyst for Washington Post. He basically summarized it perfectly.
About what transpired. What does that say to you? Well, it seems to me that if President Trump had some deliverable or something positive to brag about, he would have bragged about it by now. He would have at least hinted at it. And, you know, the fact is that although the White House set the expectations very, very low, they seem not to have even reached that bar. And that everybody knows what that one thing is that they didn't agree on. That's Ukraine, which is actually the only important thing that we're here to discuss. And if they had some good discussions about nuclear disarmament or, you know, energy deals, none of that really matters if they can't resolve anything related to Ukraine. And again, we probably would have heard it by now. And what Vladimir Putin said was very clear. He said, we have to solve the root causes of the Ukraine war, which everybody knows means that he doesn't want Zelensky to rule Ukraine. He wants to be in charge of who rules Ukraine.
So what happened is after the meeting, they came out and said their stuff. Putin spoke, I think, for 3 times longer than Trump. And then he says the root causes, and that Trump understands the root causes. So he's getting this kind of implicit agreement that they need to solve the root causes, which is denazification, which is getting rid of the Zelensky government. I mean, that is, and demilitarization. That is what Putin wants, and that's absolutely what cannot happen. It just can't.
And President Trump seems to be finally realizing that there's no overlap between their visions for it. And I think that's why you get what we had here, which is a failure to communicate.
Let me actually play.
So yeah, just absolutely on point. And you know, when you've got Russia returning to their maximalist objectives, which is what they had previously stated, you know, we want all of Donetsk. So we're hearing one of the ideas is if we have all of Donetsk, then we'll freeze the front lines where they are in the rest of the areas. So they'll still keep most of Zaporizhia and Kherson. There's no land swap. There is like, we want Donetsk and then we won't go any further, knowing that every time they've had such an agreement in the past, they've gone further. Like, this is not cool. It's just not cool. So let's now go to Tom Nichols from The Atlantic here. Jack Tapper.
There's 2 things going on here. I think one of them is that Donald Trump simply does not understand anything that is not sort of flatly transactional. He doesn't understand anything that basically isn't a real estate deal.
Boom. I referenced this earlier. This is totally what I believe. And I've been saying this for how many years? How many years have I said exactly this? He sees everything as a glorified real estate deal. And as soon as you involve alliances and complexity, he can't do it. He doesn't, because he doesn't have the knowledge of these places. He can only understand, I want to screw you over to get as much money as possible for me and my peeps, the Americans. So I want minerals, I want this, I want that. I'm going to screw you over with this. It's like contractors and negotiating over contractors in New York over a building project. And we're going to screw you over, and this building project is going to make us lots of money. But as soon as it's not that, i.e. something like last night, he's lost. He doesn't know what to do. As soon as he goes to the NATO summit, and he's surrounded by people that are speaking with experience and knowledge, that are way more knowledgeable than him. He's lost. He came back from the NATO summit saying, God, these people really love their country. It's the first time he'd experienced, on his own, that kind of, I would argue, that kind of complexity, nuance, and political strategizing. He doesn't do that. So it was really interesting. I keep saying to you, he doesn't genuinely know about a lot of things that are going on at home. Sometimes he's questioned by people in the press call, and he says, "Oh, I don't know about that. When did that happen?" And they're like, "Well, it happened today, this morning, and blah blah blah." And he's like, "Oh, I'll let you know about that." That happens time and time again. And someone did an analysis of this recently, and they put like 6 of these together. I can't remember where I either read or watched it. But they're like, this is a really common thing. Like, honestly, Trump doesn't know what's going on in his own country. He didn't know what was in the big, beautiful bill. He didn't realize it was actually going to cut Medicaid, right? He said, please don't touch Medicaid. And they're like, yeah, no, please don't, because that would be bad for us. And then lo and behold, it passed it through, and it included that. So, he doesn't actually get briefed. We know he doesn't get briefed, but he's not getting briefed on domestic things, like really big things that are happening. He's like, when did that happen? I'm like, reporters know way more than him, and he's a president of the United States. He should be being briefed on this. He doesn't know about meetings. He doesn't know about the topics over which he is meeting in any granular detail, in any domain. Like I've said to you before, listen to every single speech Trump has ever given in his entire life and tell me one example. Give me one example of when he has granular, knowledgeable detail about anything he's talking about. I mean, real like numbers, like goes into depth. Remember, he was asked at the New York Club of the Economic Club of New York, and he was asked on child policy, and he couldn't answer anything to do with child policy, and started talking about like tariffs. You're like, what? And he has no fundamental knowledge about all the stuff that he's talking about. Anyway, Tom Nichols is on point.
Does not understand anything that is not sort of flatly transactional. He doesn't understand anything that basically isn't a real estate deal. And so the idea that Putin is obsessed with Ukraine for other reasons, I think President Trump just doesn't understand any of that stuff and doesn't understand why he can't make a deal. And I think the other reason you're hearing this kind of talk from the president is, after all of this buildup, he's not going to admit failure. He is not going to walk out of there the way I think other presidents would have after a failed summit and be kind of stone-faced and say, we had a cordial, good interaction, but we didn't get anywhere, and now I'm getting on Air Force One and leaving. He has to say that it went great.
Yeah, just fully agree with that. Trump said the US maybe would provide security guarantees to Ukraine along with Europe and other countries, but not in the form of NATO. This is, like I said earlier, was one of the most positive things that came out of this from an American point of view. If the Americans are going to be involved in this, the coalition of the willing in some way, if there is going to be some security guarantee, some backstop, some provision for the Americans, and I know it's a maybe only, but then that would be very very good, or better than there being nothing of the sorts. Now let's just see the initial reactions of Fox News, and this is great, because this is when Fox News are being honest before they get time to allow the dust to settle and put their heads together and work out how they're going to spin this narrative. When you're getting it live, you get actually an unvarnished appreciation of how bad last night was.
This joint news conference was anything but. It was not a news conference. There were no questions taken by either leader.
Brett, is it safe to say, since he didn't come out and say this is a ceasefire, a cessation of violence, that that is something we didn't get all the way there?
I think they would have led with it. It would have been the thing that they would have led with, that we agree to a ceasefire. We didn't hear it. And I think that could be disappointing.
Jackie, I was surprised, no questions. I was surprised, no details on what progress was made.
So you've just heard from Brett Baer, who's pretty decent. He's all right. Brian Kilmeade is actually quite good on Ukraine, although on most other things, I want to throw him off the edge of a cliff. But anyway, Jackie Heinrich here, very interesting. And the next one, even more so.
I think you and me both, Brian, and everyone else in this room was also surprised. There were a few things that were very unusual. You had Putin come out and address the press first. I mean, we are on U.S. soil here. Usually it is the leader of the country, the host country of a summit, that speaks first and addresses the room in their language. But Putin started right off in Russian, and we all had to get our headsets on and listen to him rattle off this diatribe. There was something that he said that was a little bit alarming, I thought, that seems like some of the things that he has done in the past, setting up false flags and that kind of thing, saying that we hope that Ukraine doesn't do anything to sabotage the progress that we made today, knowing full well that Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire unconditionally for the last several months, and it has been Russia that has not agreed to a ceasefire. There were some things that Putin said that are always cause for concern. When he references things like root causes,
I know.
Yep.
It's always a reference back to his ultimate goal of taking all of Ukraine. It did not seem like things went well, and it seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say, and got his photo next to the president and then left. Certainly President Trump, who is the host and who is the president, would not want to, I think, enable something that would make him look weak. But we are eagerly awaiting to hear the background on that.
So I thought that was a fascinating insight. And then she said this at another point, which was like even more, I think, revealing.
It was just very unusual, atypical, and I think we're all awaiting, the readout, because the way that it felt in the room was not good. It did not seem like things went well, and it seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say, and got his photo next to the president and then left. It was just very unusual, atypical, and
so talking about steamrolled and then just left. And as someone says, as Paul Gouda-Debrett says, wow, how did that lady land a job at Fox? But interesting. And by the way, Kaz, I'm going to come to some of your comments later, by the way, really interesting stuff. Okay. Then this gives you a really good indication of maybe how bad it was. And I said in my previous video, and this is speculation, of course, I have a sense that Trump, because of his narcissism and sense of ego, can't read the room sometimes. So he has this like fallacy of invincibility, where he just think naturally all the time he's winning, right? He cannot accept any time of losing because he never loses. He plays golf, he cheats, and he gets people to cheat on his behalf. So he just doesn't lose. So he has this fallacy of invincibility. So he comes out that meeting thinking he has 10 out of 10 meeting. But I'm wondering whether Steve Witkoff and Marco Rubio were in that meeting and they shat themselves. And they were just like, this is an absolute disaster. This is an unmitigated disaster. And he doesn't even realize it's a disaster. So when they're coming out ashen-faced, is genuinely this was a bad meeting. And isn't it interesting? We've not heard from Marco Rubio. We've not heard from Steve Witkoff, as far as I'm aware yet. So my takeaway is that Trump thinks it was great. Everyone else there thinks it was terrible for the US. And now they've got to sell how this was good for the US, even though it was objectively terrible. And Putin has walked out with the trophy. So this is, I think, is this Peter Alexander? Anyway, this is an MSNBC report.
What struck me, Jen, in particular, was really just the looks on the faces of a lot of the American delegation here. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, Steve Witkoff, who came into the room, then left quickly, then came back in. Leavitt appeared to be a bit stressed out, anxious. Their eyes were wide, almost ashen at times. Those were some of the sort of images that will stick with me as we leave here. This was not the way the president likes to do things. He likes to be the producer of this presidency. He got that in the first half of the day, but when he was behind closed doors with Vladimir Putin, it looks like he didn't come away with anything that he claimed he wanted. He said he'd go home unhappy if there was no ceasefire. They didn't declare one here today.
So he literally said, we have to have a ceasefire, otherwise I'm going to go home early. Didn't get a ceasefire, didn't go home early, and sanctions are still on. This is a massive success for Russia. There's no doubt about it in my books. This is Richard Blumenthal, the person behind the bill, the Lindsey Graham's Blumenthal bill. This is his read.
But you have seen a lot of these kind of summits. Did anything come out of this in your mind?
Nothing came out of this summit. It was a nothing burger. It was a shrug of the shoulders. But I will tell you, Anderson, my stomach turned when I heard the President of the United States characterize Vladimir Putin as his fabulously good friend. Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. He has directed soldiers to kill women and children and bury them in mass graves. He's kidnapped children as we speak.
I mean, yeah, that's a really good point. Like, it is stomach turning to hear the President of the United States be so obsequious and be so fawning over a wanted international war criminal. Yeah, and then we have here's a little excerpt from
this country
Trump talking to Sean Hannity.
Seeing this country be great again. And Vladimir said just a little while ago, he said, I've never seen anybody do so much so fast. He said, your country is like hot as a pistol. And a year ago, he thought it was dead. Everybody thought it was dead. I love seeing.
And as Republicans against Trump says, Putin is playing Donnie like a fiddle. Like I said, you just got to go in and mass. So going back to Kaz's point, why do people fawn over Trump and massage his ego? Because then you can manipulate him. Why do you polish his shoes? Because then he gives you what you want. So, yeah, it's horrible to polish someone's shoes when you don't like them. But if you can then get, so this is, you can see this as Trump getting what he wants, but you can flip it to actually allies getting what they want. They get what they want by manipulating Trump. It just so happens that manipulating Trump looks a bit icky, right? But actually, you're just in the job of manipulating Trump. So what we have Putin manipulating Trump by going and say your country's so hot at the moment. This is what Trump says. Oh, and by the way, you had the 2020 election stolen off you. It was rigged. Yeah, that Russia hoax is nuts. But your country is hot at the moment. Blah 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 blah. And it was. That's how Putin manipulates him. We go, wow, Putin, what a good job Putin did of manipulating him. But Starmer is manipulating Trump by saying, oh, what a wonderful guy. If it wasn't for you, then we wouldn't be so close to blah, blah, blah. But then goes into getting what he wants, which is, but we need this, 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 and this. And so I think both sides are doing exactly the same thing here, except that the difference is what Putin wants from Trump is egregious, and what Europe wants from Trump is good and right and proper. I'm not going to play this out, but you've got a Ukrainian MP saying, I'm remembering all the friends that I lost in this war, and seeing this red carpet is just a disgrace. Honestly, we are the victim of this war, and we are pushed to constantly reminding the American president that we didn't start this war. So imagine what it would feel like as a Ukrainian to see the red carpet laid out, rolled out for for Vladimir Putin. It must be such an insult. March for Humanity is picking me up on this. JP, you proved yourself wrong. Europe hasn't gotten anything from flattering Trump. Well, actually, arguably they have. So arguably they've got, even though it's just selling stuff to Europe, the US are still somewhat on side. Rather than not being. So if you compare where the US is now to some months back, that is what has been brought about by flattering Trump. However, we're going to play a little bit of so I am going to contradict myself now, because we're going to play Rory Stewart in a minute saying that actually, if you look at the trajectory of all this, it seems to be moving towards the inevitable, which is Trump just capitulating in the end to Putin. Michael Weiss's read is Trump couldn't get a ceasefire from Putin, but now thinks he'll get a lasting peace from him. And hey, all it took was abasing the United States at the office of the offices of the presidency. Russia's aims are unchanged. The Europeans and Ukrainians and at least 2 members of the Trump administration know it. But America's role in this shouldn't be overstated. Everything comes down to sanctions relief or lack thereof, continued arms sales to NATO, a PURL, and Trump getting tired and bored of the issue, resigned to listlessly doodling pictures of the Nobel he'll never have. The EU isn't lifting restrictions, but issuing new ones. That's a really good point. Congress can block the lifting of major US sanctions. Good point. Billions are already committed to PURL, so it's buying stuff from the States. European leaders again reaffirmed Ukraine's sovereignty. Bullying Zelensky won't go down well a second time. So that's a more hopeful read from Michael Weiss. Like, as bad as it is, that actually, at the moment, Trump is still sort of on side here, and there are options. I've already read out to you today Medvedev's claims, which are these, and I will read these very quickly again. I won't go too much into detail in them, other than each one of these show you how Russia has won. Go and see my previous videos where I go to town on these. So what he said, 1, a full-fledged mechanism for meetings between Russia and the USA at the highest level has been restored, calm without ultimatums or threats. Yay, we don't get ultimatums, with no threats, and we get to have a meeting on US soil. Woo! 2, the president of Russia personally and in detail presented to the president of the USA our conditions for ending the conflict in Ukraine. Woohoo! The US president has reiterated our demands. 3, as a result of an almost 3-hour conversation, the head of the White House refused to escalate pressure on Russia, at least for now. Woohoo! We've got no sanctions. 4, important. The meeting proved that negotiations are possible without preconditions and simultaneously with the continuation of the special military operations. So 4, woo, no ceasefire, and we get to continue the war while we're having negotiations. We can string this out as long as we like, and there's no ceasefire, no sanctions. Hey, winners. 5, the main point, both sides directly place the responsibility for achieving future results in negotiations on ending hostilities on Kyiv and Europe. 5th point, woohoo, we can all blame all, as in the US and Russia, we can both blame Zelensky and the Europeans if this all goes wrong. We've given our demands to Trump. Trump has reiterated those demands. He's on our side. We don't have sanctions. We don't have a ceasefire. We can sit down and talk in wonderful comfort with the Americans. And now, if Kyiv doesn't agree to our officious demands, then it's their fault. Zelensky's a scapegoat. Medvedev has told you everything that happened in that meeting. Medvedev has communicated that Russia won the meeting. Medvedev has communicated very clearly that Putin owned Trump. Jakub Yanda says in the kind of appraisal of the good news and bad news. Good news is, so let's look at the positives. No big deal over the heads of the Ukraine. So nothing was signed away. Ukraine wasn't sold down the river. 2, the summit was cut short. There was no celebratory luncheon as planned, right? Which means that it didn't go as well as maybe people had thought. And you could read that both ways, actually. 3, Trump publicly contradicted Putin to say there was no deal. 4, not even economic, energy, Arctic or nuclear arms deals. Russia is failing to grab such distraction agenda. 5, no American sanction relief for Russia. So they didn't relieve sanctions, although there are some claims that Google is operating and there's some offers of ExxonMobil in Russia. So, but 6, no Russian deal over NATO. The bad news is there's no new major American sanctions on Russia as previously promised. So he's walked away from extra sanctions. And public humiliation of the United States by a Russian war criminal. Main takeaway, Russia is playing for time and delaying. But as someone says, there are plenty of deals behind the scenes. So I bet there were deals done. If we go to the Guardian Live blog, just a few parts here. Putin told Trump he could relax some territorial claims in exchange for Donetsk region. That's what we talked about earlier. But actually, Trump saw this as a fundraising thing. Loads of emails went out to raise funds in him meeting with Putin. So there's a real bit of grifting that took place on the back of it, which it leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. But European leaders are invited to Monday's Washington meeting with Zelensky, according to European officials. So that will be very important. If already on this meeting is going to take place imminently between Zelensky, because I was thinking about this, although Zelensky's going to go and meet with Trump, and that's a really good thing, like Zelensky's English is not good enough to, I think, get the better of Trump and manipulate Trump in the correct way. You need someone like Mark Rutte there. You need someone like Macron, Starmer, Merz. You know, you need some big hitters, or at least people who can support Zelensky. I think Zelensky in a meeting on his own, even with other Ukrainians, is not to the benefit of Ukraine. So I'm really happy that there are Europeans there with him. Right, this is worth looking at. Just cast your eye over this. I will enlarge in this. This is just someone quietly on their phone recording Trump talking with an interpreter to, I think that's an interpreter to, Putin talking with an interpreter to Trump. Look at Putin's body here. Now, I've reported to you before, I think there's lots of evidence to suggest Putin is not well. I've claimed that he has Parkinson's. There are claims that he has some form of cancer, that he went to Israel to get the very best cancer treatment, and that's why Israel and Russia have this interesting relationship. There are a lot of Russians in Israel as well, but anyway, there are lots of pieces of evidence to point towards Putin not being very well. But look at his body, look at his legs, and look at that. Look at what he just did. Now, this is what my body does with MS when I spasm with MS. Look at his back and legs. I'm going to play that again. I'm going to play that again. So he couldn't stop moving. He's spasming. Like, this is why Trump very often is sat down or walking, but also there are claims about multiple Putins, right? You know, I think one of them is ill. Anyway, I just thought as an interesting little thing to show you. And this is coming from Mikhail Saakashvili. So he's an imprisoned Georgian former leader who is being slowly poisoned in jail. It's an absolute travesty what's happening to this man. But this is what he tweeted out yesterday afterwards. After more than 30 meetings with Putin, I can say this. So this guy's met Putin 30 times. He is a KGB officer, not a politician. Lying in is his language, and his ceasefires are a trap. He only respects strength. My own experience in political imprisonment is a reminder of his vindictiveness. The West must never forget this reality. Absolutely on point. Now, the last thing I'm going to do before going to a few of your comments, and I know I've been speaking for a long one, this is going to be a long video, as you already know. Thank you for bearing with me. I am going to play you a fairly extended part of Rory Stewart's analysis of this with Alistair Campbell. Rory Stewart on the left is a former Conservative politician and mayoral candidate for London, and a member of the UK government. He was Secretary for International Development, was he? He was on defence committees and whatnot. He's a veteran himself. And you've got Alistair Campbell, who's Labour, a former spin doctor for Tony Blair. So these two are talking, and I think this is really good analysis.
So I was actually thinking, oh, look, it looks like it's going to be happening more quickly. I'll tell you when I thought there might be no deal. Was Steve Witkoff walked in, and I thought he might just have been attention seeking, because of course, as soon as he walked into the press room, they were, oh my God, it's Steve Witkoff. But he looked very gloomy, and then he walked out again. But I'll tell you the moment I thought, this is weird. Do you remember when Trump was in Turnberry was in Scotland with Keir Starmer, and we were saying it looked like Trump was the host? Putin opened proceedings at the press conference,
which is unheard of, isn't it? It's completely unheard of. Yeah.
It's like, you know, the host would normally say a few words, and Trump said, and this has always been arranged. You don't go into. I've been in these meetings with Tony Blair and Putin where you know, and some of them went very badly wrong, but you basically plan what's going to happen, and so they'd obviously planned. Vladimir, you speak first, and he spoke 3 times longer than Trump did, and then took no questions. I'll tell you what, in the minute Putin started, it was basically a history lesson. And then when he started to go on about the root causes, Donald understands the root causes. We know what that means. This has been his line the whole way through. And so at that moment, I thought, unless there's something to come from Trump, then this is a disaster. Particularly, I think, for Trump. I mean, you could argue from Zelensky's point of view, and Zelensky's going to Washington tomorrow, they've announced, that at least he wasn't brutally sold down the river. They didn't come out and say, we've agreed that Russia should have 20% of Ukraine, which they might have done. But I think that watching it live was like, I remember the title of Bob Gelder's book after Live Aid, Is That It? It was literally what just happened there? Because if you think about it, the only justification, and when I was channel hopping, there was an American general I saw on one of the channels saying that he found the site of American soldiers rolling a red carpet out to a Putin plane for him, an indicted war criminal, to walk down and have Donald Trump, as you say, applaud him as he walks toward him, and then do that. I didn't realize until later that when they got to the thing with the big Alaska 2025 for the photo, one of the reporters shouted out, "Are you going to stop killing civilians?" And Trump and Putin went, "Oh, I can't hear. And then the whole thing about getting in the car together. And that was weird. Putin's car was parked alongside. Trump, I suspect, said, "Why don't you ride with me?" Putin looked very, very happy to be doing that. We'll probably never know what was said. But the feeling you got from watching Trump live was, 1, this guy's tired. 2, he is not his usual confident self. When is he ever in a room with journalists and he doesn't take questions? When has that ever happened?
Yeah.
So they agreed no questions.
Yeah, can I just on that one, sorry, this is one I'm also obsessed with, because as you've pointed out, one of the reasons why so many world leaders have been through these very uncomfortable and in some cases profoundly humiliating events happen in these moments before the meetings with Trump, where you get all the questions coming. That was the moment at which Zelensky was ambushed and humiliated by J.D. Vance and Trump. That was the moment where the South African president was put through this completely mad series of allegations about genocide against white farmers. Those were the moments actually where there were slightly uncomfortable moments, even for Starmer and Macron. So I guess, given all that, Putin concluded quite rightly that the last thing you want to do going to a meeting with Trump is put yourself in one of these ridiculous sit on a sofa things where Trump chucks things around and 200 journalists throw questions at you. But I suppose my question is, why was Putin able to demand that in a way that Starmer, Macron, President of the European Union, can't? I mean, why couldn't Starmer just say, look, I'm not doing that?
He could. And I wonder whether I actually, if there's anybody from Zelensky's team listening, absolutely insist tomorrow there is no media. Beyond the pictures, there is no media before you have the meeting. Putin will have insisted in that, I suspect. And look, let's be honest, the whole pitch of the thing was Putin's in charge here. Even though it was in America, although Trump called it Russia earlier and said last night, I'm going back to the United States. And then even though it was in the beast, his car, nonetheless, it sort of looked like Putin was in charge. And I can remember from some of our encounters with Putin, he's got this smirk that he sometimes does. And it sometimes means that he's happy, and it sometimes means that he's threatening. And I think last night it was a bit of both. He was smirking because he knew that in terms of how this is going to be seen by the world, because let's just go through what we were saying before about what they wanted from this summit. What did Putin want above all? He wanted the event. He's been a pariah. He's an indicted war criminal. He cannot go to many countries in the world because those countries would then have a duty to arrest him. America's not a signatory to the ICC, so it wouldn't happen there. He did not want to be put in a position where he had to agree to a ceasefire. And the C word, the ceasefire, was not even mentioned. It may have been mentioned in the meeting, we don't know. But at the press conference, not a word. So he didn't get pushed on that.
Yeah. Well, furthermore, there were drones actually falling. Russian was firing
as they
drones
were speaking.
As they were speaking. But I want to get onto a question from Ember, which will bring you to your previous encounters with Putin. But I just thought maybe let's just take a quick time to remind people of how the world we're looking at now in August would have seemed in October last year a complete disaster.
So this is what I want you to listen to. This is the idea that this was an inevitable trajectory. I know some of you are talking about this in the live chat, which was his walk along the red carpet. This is Trump's walk. Apparently down the stairs wasn't great either. It's sped up here because otherwise it'd take too long to watch. But there it is. So, you know, he was sort of wandering all over the shop. That's essentially how I walk, by the way. In fact, far worse than that. But yeah, so, you know, it wasn't seen as, you know, putting his best foot forward, I guess, quite literally. We're going to go back, just listen to a couple minutes more of this, of Rory Stewart, because this is a really important point. And I want to know what you think about it.
From the point of view of the US and Europe, our expectations have got lower and lower and lower and lower. So back in October last year, the debate was, should we be trying to defeat Russia quickly or stop Russia winning more slowly? And there was absolutely no doubt that the whole of NATO, US, Europe, were completely behind Ukraine. And the reason for that is it was inconceivable that Russia could invade a neighboring country, take 20% of its territory, spark a war which has ended up with more than 1 million people being wounded and killed, and get away with it. I mean, there's nothing like this has happened since the Second World War in Europe. It's unbelievable, right? Then Trump comes in, and suddenly things change. We get into a debate about, will America continue to support? So will it continue to provide money to Ukraine? No, it won't. Then Trump says, and by the way, I'd like $500 billion worth of minerals. Okay, $500 billion worth of minerals. Then it's like, will America even keep its satellite and intelligence coverage? Will America even be prepared to sell weapons to Europe to give to Ukraine? Fast forward, and the last discussion, I guess, over the last 2 months has been to say to Trump, whatever you do, do not meet Putin one-on-one. It's got to be a meeting with Zelensky in the room. Please, please don't do that. Suddenly a week ago, we're going to meet Putin one-on-one. Then, presumably, the European position became simply, and this I think was a call on the 13th of August, whatever you do, just don't sign a deal. Just don't agree to any land swaps. But the story that I'm telling is just the expectations getting worse and worse and worse. And my instinct, and I'd love your sense of this, is that behind all the blarney and the news stuff, fundamentally, Trump's instincts remain unaltered. His instincts are pro-Putin, pro-Russia, contemptuous, basically, of Europe and Ukraine, believing, as he just said on the Fox News interview with Sean Hannity, that Russia is a really big, strong, powerful country and Ukraine isn't. And that
it's a really good point. So the idea here is that there's an inevitability to this, that Trump is just naturally and intuitively aligned to Russia and to Putin. And he came out this, and you're meeting, it might be that we've seen a bit of a blip in this kind of context where the US has kind of aligned itself a little bit with Europe. It might be other people around Trump. It might be people who are convincing Trump from the international community. But when he gets back into the Heritage Foundation, like headspace of the White House, then he's just back into aligning himself with Putin, and sitting with Sean Hannity and saying how wonderfully big that Russia is 11 time zones. Didn't you know? He's like saying this is why would he say that? This is justification for how much Ukraine is unable to come out of this with kind of prevailing, right? The Russia is going to win. It's just much bigger, and I like big countries. US is a big country. We've got Russia, and then there's India and China. These are all the kind of countries now that are carving up the world, and Ukraine is just destined to lose. And yeah, so Rory Stewart's talking about this inevitability.
Ultimately, he's going to get peace by essentially giving Putin everything that he's captured so far and calling an end to it. And all that's happened really over the last 6-7 months is a sort of miraculous attempt by Ukraine, Europe, his own officials, sometimes at the cost of immense self-humiliation, including committing 5% of GDP spending on defense, to try to just stop Trump from doing what it almost feels like he's inevitably eventually going to do, which is sell out Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, but if that is the case, why not just do it? Why this endless game playing? Because the other thing I kept thinking as watching this last night, because if you're looking at this from, particularly when I was watching these American generals talk about it and say they felt this was a real humiliation for the United States to see this happening, and then to see him get nothing for it. And I've got to be honest, Rory, I did end up thinking, well, maybe the whole thing was just about getting Epstein off the front pages. And maybe Russia really, really, really does have something on Trump that none of us have really thought through, because we know he survived so many different scandals. So it would have to be something quite amazing. And I'll tell you something that was interesting when you watch, and of course, watching all these TV channels last night, they talked endlessly about the optics and the body language, because that's what they do when there's bugger all else to talk about. But if you want to think, so he arrives, clap, 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 pat on the hand, jokey, jokey, get in the car, big smile out the window. When they then had the photo call with no questions again, with the 3-on-3 in the meeting, something had happened between the arrival and that meeting, because they suddenly they weren't communicating to each other, they weren't looking at each other. It had got, I think, very, very chilly. Now, was that something that was said in the car? Was that Trump suddenly realizing, oh, because remember he said, one of the many stupid things Trump has said in recent days, I'll know in the first 2 minutes whether there's going to be a deal. Putin may have thought, the first 2 minutes, well, let's see if I can get him one-on-one for that. And he got him one-on-one. And of course, if you remember when we talked to Fiona Hill, who at Trump's last meeting with Putin in Helsinki in 2018, whenever it was, she actually said that, I was thinking about it, that it was so bad at the press conference, she honestly contemplated faking a seizure so that he could, because it was very similar. He was siding with the intelligence agencies, with Russia against his own intelligence agencies. And on that, the thing about Putin, he's very good at working out which buttons to press with the person, with his interlocutor. And what did he say? I can confirm, like this is an empirical fact, I can confirm that if Trump had been president, there wouldn't have been a war, which of course is one of Trump's utter obsessions. What was the first thing he said when he's talking to Sean Hannity? You know, and Putin agreed with me that Russia hoax. If I'd been, I was very happy, he said, that Putin said, if I'd been president, there wouldn't be a war. This is Putin playing 100% to his narcissism.
100%, and it's really great. Go and watch the rest of that. But so sorry that was so long, but I think it was a really good insight into that meeting. So there you go. Like I think, as those two, I think, were intimating, it was a real disaster for the Americans. I think almost more of a disaster for the Americans than for the Ukrainians. I think what we learn from that is that the US is subservient to Russia at the moment, politically speaking, as far as the leaders are concerned. Ukraine isn't done for because they have the support of Europe. And if Europe can stay together and unite behind Ukraine, then essentially we're back to 7 months ago. That's the frustration. And this is kind of what Rory Stewart was talking about. There's an inevitability there that Trump is just going to default to this pro-Putin position. It's interesting. I think there was a good comeback from Alistair Campbell there saying, well, why bother having that meeting at all then? And I think it just depends. You know, you can bend Trump towards your will quite easily. And that's what's happened in European leaders, and Zelensky have miraculously turned it around of late. But I think the default position for Trump is going to be pro-Putin. And in order to get him away from that default position, you need to get him out of the White House, and you need to get him away from the Heritage Foundation. It's interesting that one of you guys said exactly what I believe. I forget who it was. It was Paul. So Paul Guda-Debritz. The GOP is funded through Hungary these days. The Heritage Foundation owns the thing. The Heritage Foundation owns the White House. The Heritage Foundation has changed from what it used to be, say, 20 years ago. It is now a far more problematic ideological think tank. I don't even think it's a think tank anymore. I think it is the organization behind the White House. So the Project 2025 900-page book is the blueprint for the present White House administration. And the Heritage Foundation own the White House, which is why when he sacks the leader of the BLS, the Labor Survey, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, sorry, when he sacks McEnteffer, who does he replace her with? Will seek to replace her with E.G. Antoni, who is a member of the Heritage Foundation and plays fast and loose with statistics. Everyone is connected in one way or another to Heritage Foundation, whether it be Michael Vaught, Tom Homan, whoever. These are Heritage Foundation people. Russell Vaught, not Michael Vaught. This is really. I think the Heritage Foundation is a very dangerous organization, and they run the American government at the moment. Right, just going to get back to you guys. Sorry, I've taking so long on this video. So let's try and wrap this up, but give you guys the time that you deserve. Alan Dixon, thank you very much for supporting. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Daryl Thomas says, UK and EU need a plan B when flattery fails. Yes. So I hopefully, so I want to get back to these ideas actually in a second, Daryl. So give me 2 ticks. Tom, thank you for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Really appreciate that. Wizard of Ooze, member for 18 months. Thank you. 2 polished turds in the belly of the beast. Very well done. That's the card called the Beast. Very good. Okay, Mitch Mazarel. So thanks, Canadian love to you, my friend. My guess as to why the US had Lutnick there was Russia's dire and increasing need to engage companies like Schlumberger and Halliburton to assist with the rebuild of oil facilities. European options will remain off the table. It's an interesting point. So my thoughts were, I mean, I said, why the hell is he there? I know why he was there. He was there because really how Trump sees these negotiations as a way to get American commerce, commercial ties thriving between the US and Russia, right? So you have Scott Bessent. Like, isn't it fascinating that you're trying to sort out a war, you're trying to sort out international security, and you go and have a meeting, and these are the 5 people. You have yourself, you have Steve Witkoff, who is a real estate mogul and golf playing buddy of Trump, who has somehow ended up being the envoy to Russia, but he has no expertise. You have Marco Rubio as a single person with any expertise, but he's not a fan of Russia. He's a Secretary of State. You'd absolutely have to have your foreign secretary there. So he's your Secretary of State. But then you have Scott Bessent, who's your Treasury Secretary. Why have your Treasury Secretary there? You got Howard Lutnick. He's your Commerce Secretary. These are the 2 that keep getting wheeled out to talk about tariffs and to talk about how wonderful the American economy is. These people are there. And well, why do you not have your Secretary of Defense? Like, it's absolutely staggering. So the level of ineptitude there, when you understand a traditional appraisal of what kind of meeting this should and could be and would be otherwise, then these people make no sense. But when you're like, oh, right, we're just going to go and do a deal about Ukraine without Ukraine, and we're going to open up the Russian oil industry to our concerns, oh, it turns out that Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent make a lot more sense. So, Mitch, you're absolutely 100% right there. Thank you very much to the Wizard of Ooze. What would the Doris analogy be to this sorry situation, or is she in the lost luggage? I still haven't got my luggage back. Still haven't heard back from Gatwick. Ugh. Anyway, not all my luggage, just one case. It was under my wheelchair, and we then took the wheelchair back, or my boy took the wheelchair back, and it had my bloody bag underneath. Anyway, it wasn't my bag, so I've lost the jumper, but it's my favorite summer jumper. Anyway, so what was I talking about? Doris. So what is a Doris analogy? I'd have to think a lot about that. But essentially, Doris is still at home while people are negotiating over there as to who gets her house. A couple of the neighbors are negotiating. Basically, the neighbor next to Doris, who keeps going around and beating her up, he's having a meeting with Brad, who lives across the way, and they're just talking about how much of Doris's house they get to keep, and whether Brad can, because Brad's already picking Doris's raspberries, right? He's wondering whether he can have access to some of the potatoes next door in Ivan's house. So Ivan's next door to Doris, just beats up Doris every so often. Brad's just trying to sort it out, but by sorting it out, he's going to have some of Ivan's potatoes, and he's going to let actually Ivan probably have some of Doris's strawberries. So yeah, anyway, that's my tenuous and strangled metaphor. Mark, good to have you here, Marky. Thank you so much, mate. Trump's participation will only prolong the war. He is out of his element, yes. Dangerously so, yes. I believe Ukraine's only reliance on the US should be the purchase of weapons. I think practically that's where we're at. The question is whether, like, what I'd like to see is, going back to what Kaz was saying, like, ideally, if the Europe stands up to the US, they stand up in a way that doesn't piss off the US, but says, do you know what, we'll take it from here. But the thing is, Putin won't meet with Europe in a way that he's met with Trump. Now, people will say, look, that's because that's how good Trump is. He can get he can get Putin to come and meet while he's the best leader. The question is, why would Putin agree to meet Trump? So anyone who's like a pro-Trump MAGA supporter who says how wonderful Trump is because he gets these meetings, and no one, imagine Biden wouldn't be able to get this meeting. No, because Putin wouldn't be able to manipulate Biden. Putin has agreed to that meeting precisely because he can manipulate Trump. So if Europe stands up to Trump, or at least says, look, we'll take it from here, we're gonna negotiate on behalf of and with Zelensky, with Putin, Putin won't agree to that. He'll just keep doing the war. And that's the dynamic we've kind of got. So Europe needs to push Trump out, but will they have any courage to do so? And here's the problem. You push Trump out. Trump then says, right, we won't sell you this. We're going to pull intelligence away from Ukraine. So this is what I was going to say to Kaz earlier. You know, and they say, look, realpolitik got us Putin. It failed. Politics divorced from morality leads to immorality. I am still using morality. What I'm saying is you sometimes have to take a hit for the greater good. And the hit is polishing Trump's boots. Because if you don't polish Trump's boots and you start telling Trump what he really is out in public, then Trump will stop doing stuff that will make Ukraine lose. Trump will stop sharing intel with Ukraine. Trump will stop selling weapons to Ukraine. Trump will start X, Y, and Z, right? And then Ukraine are in trouble. You know, if they can't get Patriot missiles, if they can't get HIMARS missiles, if they don't have American satellites, like this is the bully of America and the power and leverage that the US has. And that leverage has unfortunately leverage over the Europeans such that they are still genuflecting before Trump and the US because unfortunately they need to. I would like Europe to push America out, but in a way that doesn't annoy America, just like we'll take it from here. If that was possible, that'd be great. But then, as I say, the flip side is you won't get Putin to the meeting. But I don't think you need Putin to voluntarily want to come to the meeting. You need to force him to the meeting. And the way you force him to the meeting is blow the crap out of every refinery in Russia. Is you give the weapons to destroy the Kerch Bridge and to do this and to do that. Novorossiysk needs to be hammered. Peace through strength. So Ukraine has security, says Kaz, security agreements with the US and UK. It's called the Budapest Memorandum. Our words are worthless, and UK only agrees if a ceasefire with which Putin and now Trump rejected. Now, I used to believe the same as Kaz, but I was corrected by someone who I thought was being a troll, but actually correctly corrected me. And a Budapest Memorandum is not a security agreement in general. It's a nuclear security agreement. And actually, when you read the text, and it's not very long, in fact, I could pull it up now and we could go through it. But actually, all it does is it promises nuclear security, not general security. So actually, the Budapest Memorandum is not relevant to what is going on in Ukraine now, apart from a general understanding of support memorandum. Let's very quickly, and this will be one of the last things we do. So can we see the yes, I think we can see the PDF here, the certificate of registration text document. Okay, is this it? Right, so I think this is the Budapest Memorandum. It is not long, right? So Kaz, and I do this. I was corrected on this, and I was shown to be wrong. Okay, so here's a Budapest Memorandum, and it says, as I say, it's not long at all. It says it confirms the following between these nations, right? So the nations are the Ukraine, Russian Federation, UK, Great Britain, and United States. Great Britain, Northern Ireland, and United States. So the Russian Federation, United Kingdom, Great Britain, and Northern Ireland, and the US of America, US of A, reaffirmed their commitment to Ukraine in accordance with the principles of the CSCE Final Act to respect the independence and sovereignty of the existing borders of Ukraine. Right. So Russia have failed on that. They have not respected the borders, obviously. Now we respect the borders, but what does that what does that mean other than we reaffirm our commitment? So we have a commitment to respect the independence and sovereignty of Ukraine. Well, you can argue we still do, but they don't. Okay, well, what do we do about that? It's not stipulated there. The Russian Federation, UK, and the US reaffirmed their obligation to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of Ukraine, and that none of their weapons will ever be used against Ukraine except in self-defense or otherwise in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. So then part 2 basically just says we won't attack Ukraine, but Russia has. What it doesn't stipulate is what we do if one of these signatories attacks Ukraine, other than to rely on the United Nations in accordance with the Charter of the UN. So we need to use the mechanisms of the UN. The Russian Federation, the UK and US reaffirmed their commitment to Ukraine in accordance with the principles of the CSCE Final Act to refrain from economic coercion designed to subordinate to their own interests the exercise of Ukraine of the rights inherent in the sovereignty and thus to secure advantage of any kind. Russia again have failed with that. Interestingly, the US have arguably economically coerced Ukraine with the minerals extortion. So indeed, the US has failed on the Budapest Memorandum. But the problem is, and then what? The Russian Federation, Part 4, the UK and US reaffirmed their commitment to seek immediate United Nations Security Council action to provide assistance to Ukraine as a non-nuclear weapon state party to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. If Ukraine should ever become a victim of an act of aggression or an object of a threat of aggression in which nuclear weapons are used. And here's the key part. It's not us coming to the defense of Ukraine. It's the United Nations Security Council. But both of those points, they are either a victim to an act of aggression or an object of a threat of aggression. So both of those things in which nuclear weapons are used, they've not been used. So the Budapest Memorandum is only relevant, I think, to nuclear weapons, and even then, only in getting the United Nations Security Council together. So it's a UN reaction. The Russian Federation, UK and US reaffirm in the case of Ukraine their commitment not to use nuclear weapons against any non-nuclear weapon state party to the treaty or the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, except in the case of an attack on themselves, their territories or dependent territories, their armed forces, their allies by such a state or in association or alliance with a nuclear weapon state. So again, it's a nuclear weapons statement, not relevant to conventional warfare. Ukraine, Russia, Great Britain, US will consult in the event of a situation arises which raises a question concerning these commitments. Okay, we're going to consult. So the point of I used to use the Budapest Memorandum as like we are contractually obliged to support Ukraine if they're attacked by another signatory. The reality is we are not. Budapest Memorandum is toothless, and it is only really designed to be concerned with nuclear aggression, economic coercion. But even then, all we do is it's just asked us to go back to the UN to sort it out. So, yeah, we do need to rely more on the UN. The UN does need to be stronger, but unfortunately, Budapest Memorandum isn't all that. Now, Kaz again says the Russian trolls and paid influencers will drop Epstein. That was only to pressure Trump to do what he did, stop sanctions on Russia. That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that, where a lot of online influencers might well be Russian trolls and bots trying to big up Epstein. However, I think there's a lot to say about this being another big distraction from Epstein. And I hope to goodness that Trump gets back to the US and Epstein is resurrected as a cudgel to hit Trump over the head with, because he needs to be held to account. So, yeah. But thanks, Kaz, for all of those comments. Goose Springsteen, JP, thank you for all your hard work. Do you think in the end, Europe will ever stop towing Trump's line, even if he coerces Ukraine into an unjust peace? This is what I concern myself thinking about so often, Goose, and thanks for your support and great question. I don't think they will, because this is Europe's security at the end of the day. Like if we kowtow to the US, even when they sell Ukraine down the river, actually, Russia is already attacking European nations. Actually, we all understand, our leaders understand the threat Russia is directly to Europe. So Poland, the Baltic states, the Nordic states will not stand for us allowing the US to completely hang Ukraine out to dry. So at the moment, we're not there, that full-on dilemma. what Europe is trying to do is polish Trump's boots enough that he stays on board and provides satellite data and weapons to Ukraine, either indirectly or directly. And that is still the main objective for the European leaders. It's not nice. It's not pretty. Kaz doesn't like it. I don't like it. I prefer Trump to be morally aligned with Ukraine, but he's not. He's transactional, doesn't give a shit about Ukraine. He doesn't care for people. He keeps saying, I want to stop the killing. He doesn't care about that, really. He says that as a kind of, as he keeps saying, I'm not really interested in the Nobel Peace Prize. What I really care about is stopping the killing. No, you actually really care about the Nobel Peace Prize and you don't really care about the killing. So, you know, that's my position. So I still hold out hope for Europe, but they are just clinging at the moment to the idea that the US can be manipulated, or Trump can be manipulated. Thanks to Zeb Carter, gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Hopefully I was fair enough to your responses and comments. Thank you, Kaz. I know I sort of disagree with you, but I don't want to disagree. Like, I want Europe to stand up morally, with a strong backbone, but I just think at the moment we need America's help. Ukraine needs America's assistance in particular ways that no one else can provide. That's a leverage that the US has, and that's why we are acting like we are. I have to go now. My partner, I've seen her walking past the window, just wondering why the hell I'm still talking to you guys and not to her. So there you go. Yeah. So, Kaz, if you're talking about Budapest Memorandum, yeah, I'd have to say it is not worth as much as I used to think it was at all. Yeah, so Michael Gaddy, memorandum is like NATO Article 5. You can send blankets to say you've helped. Yeah, but it's useful going through the Budapest Memorandum because we talk about it so often, but actually going through the text, because it's so short as well, it's quite easy to go through. So I know I've done that before, but it's probably worth doing that again because, goodness me, most of you won't have watched when I last did it, which was probably 2.5 years ago or something. But yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm happy to be back. I'm not. I absolutely loved being on holiday, and yeah, I had a wonderful time away. Spent the entire time being ill in different ways, but still loved it. And yeah, UK, it's great to be back, mainly because of the tea. The weather's been lovely since we got back, but I think it's clouded over. Like, I really, when I go on holiday, right, I want British weather to be freaking miserable. I want it to be right, because, you know, you pay a lot of money to go on holiday with 4 people, right, for 2 weeks. So, you know, it's our big thing every year, and we go and do that. And I'm like, right now, you guys better be miserable in the UK. I hope there's rain. I hope the 10 plagues of Israel, 10 plagues of Egypt have swept through the UK. Obviously, don't really think this, but I do at least want it to be raining, so I can say, we had it lovely over there, and then come back, and then the clouds open and welcome me back into Gatwick Airport. The sun's shining, and I'm like, and I just, you know, limp through. No, I get wheeled through and out into the open. I'm like, yes, I'm back. The sun is shining. Cup of tea, please. Sun is shining. You've all been miserable. I'm back. You're all going to be happy now. But obviously, you know, I do live in a weird, distorted reality. So there you go. It's been too long of me talking. 2 hours, 40 minutes, way too long. Take care, everybody. Big love. And thank you so much to all those who have so generously supported the channel. I really, really do appreciate that. Funnily enough, I've not been to Canada. I do want to go to Canada. It is on my bucket list. I was going to go there snowboarding when I could do things like that, and I went to New Zealand instead. I was going to go to Whistler for a season. Anyway, I'll get there one day. I will get there one day. Thank you to the wonderful community. Thanks to the mods. Thanks to all the people that help the channel. You guys take care. You're all wonderful. Apart from you. You know who you are. You know who you are, Ivan. You troll. Not the Ivan makes me tea, but the troll Ivan. Yeah, you. I know you. Sitting there in St. Petersburg in the Internet Research Agency. Stop it. Stop spreading disinformation, you bad human. For the rest of you, you're all right. Take care. Doodle pips.